Political Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Y'all Man of Revolution, and we do have a World War III alert. We have a World War III alert. Be sure to wipe your feet. You in the House of Revolution. That means hit the like button, like, share, subscribe, support the platform. I'm running off my Wi-Fi off my phone, y'all. The internet is still not up and running in this area. So hopefully we make it through the live properly. If it dropped, don't go nowhere. Give me a second. I went to my phone network and topped it up. I just paid some money to top it up. So they should give me more data. We should make it through this program with enough. We should have enough time and enough connection. So salute to all y'all. Let's get into today's revolutionary topic. We start with men, women, and kids died today in Ukraine. Missile attack on a hospital. You know, we don't like that. But who done it is what we want to talk about. Who attacked that hospital? And why was this hospital attacked? Let's hear a little bit what fake news is saying. And then y'all know I already dug up the truth. I know exactly who done it, but let's just hear the lies that they tried to spread.
You straight to Ukraine because Russia has launched a wave of airstrikes on cities across the country, killing at least 29 people and injuring more than 50 others. One of the buildings damaged in the capital, Kyiv, is Ukraine's largest children's hospital.
All I want to do is, first of all, I want y'all to take a look at that building. Just make sure y'all look at that building. Now, something that now people are pointing out, and Ukraine should have thought about before they showed this building on the news was, if a Russian missile directly hits this building, the building evaporates. There's no more building. Now, what happened was the Ukrainians hit this building with an air defense missile trying to knock down a Russian missile. And we do have a video of that. But so actually the Ukrainians accidentally, so they say, killed their own kids in that hospital.
And here you can see the aftermath of the attack where they are still hosing it down, as you can see, but there are many people on the ground. These are pictures right now which were posted actually by President Zelensky's team, and you can see the damage there as well to the building. The medical staff, the first there trying to clear the rubble away by hand. Pictures from inside show the damage to one of the rooms, a lot of glass, broken glass on the ground, and you can see there just how much damage has been done to that particular room. Well, Mr. Zelensky says Russia has fired more than 40 missiles targeting 5 Ukrainian cities, including Kyiv, where 7 people have reportedly been killed. Elsewhere, at least 10 died in strikes in Kryvyi, Sloviansk, Dnipro, and Kramatorsk also hit today. I've been speaking to Vitaly Klitschko, who's the mayor of Kyiv, who gave me his reaction to the attack.
It's not special operation. It's not the war. It's genocide of population in Ukraine. It's right now the whole world see how Russian missiles and kamikaze drones killed Ukrainian citizens. Our peaceful city is right now the children hospitals will be hitting with from Russian missiles. We don't know exactly the numbers of the people who will be killed and injuries. Right now we're saving people from the rubble of the buildings, and we're working right now, and we know the numbers of
what Ukraine really got exposed for. And I do have the Russian UN representative exposing these clowns at the UN today. But it is a war crime to have air defense systems in civilian populations. That's why the US and NATO came on TV, lied through their teeth. But it's Ukrainians who posted video that I'm gonna show who told the truth. They know exactly what happened. These people are liars. It's a war crime to have your heavy weapons near civilian populations, and that's what happened. Russia was attacking military installations. Ukraine got air defenses near hospitals, and their missile hit the hospital, and we got the video of that. But it's a war crime. You're not supposed to have no missiles near no hospital.
Of people who is injuries and skills is big. Right now, 66 people have injuries. We don't know exactly numbers, how many people killed, because I told we're having right now the people from rubbles of the buildings, and it's a big tragedy for one more tragedy for our hometown, for capital of Ukraine.
Mayor Klitschko, I need to get your response straight away to what we are hearing from the Russian Defense Ministry, who says that allegations that it has deliberately targeted civilian infrastructure are absolutely untrue. And they say this destruction is caused by the fall of a Ukrainian air defense missile launched from an anti-aircraft missile system within the city.
Now, that's exactly what happened. But since he's a liar, and they just used to lying so much, and like the Russian UN representative pointed out at the UN, if a Russian missile would have hit the hospital, everybody would be dead in there. Everybody would have been dead if that Russian missile would have hit it.
From what you've seen, what has happened at the hospital?
Please don't listen to Russian propaganda. They always find excuses. They always try an explanation. It's not a war. It's special operation. They destroyed the critical infrastructure of our hometown and explain they try to hit the military objects. It's not true. It's 3 years long. The Russians destroyed Ukraine. Putin need Ukraine as property. Us Ukrainian, he don't need. And that's why I call that genocide of Ukraine population.
Thank you for responding to that statement. Can I ask you about the children in the hospital, the ones that have been evacuated, and we've seen pictures of them sitting outside?
Oh, man, okay. You know, I don't know. I just want to get out we just want to get a little taste of some of the lies. Let's hear a little bit more. I'm not going to hear all the lies from these people.
The NATO summit. What message is Putin sending to NATO and the West by attacking Ukraine like this?
You're absolutely right. This is a disastrous day in Kiev, and all around Ukraine, we already lost not 28, as you mentioned, but 31 people, and the rescue work is not finishing, and more than 100 is injured, heavily injured. And I saw with my own eyes the missiles in the Kiev sky this morning, where our air defense working. 2 from 3 missiles was hit, but the price Ukraine pay every day is disastrous. Can you imagine that this happening is exactly at this day? And this is not a coincidence, because exactly today, the Indian Prime Minister Modi planned to visit Moscow, and the Prime Minister Orban of Hungary have a meeting in Beijing with President Xi. And this is just a demonstration how ready Putin is for the ceasefire, for the peace. And this is my appeal. Don't trust Putin. Don't believe Putin. Putin, and I know it from my own experience, working with him for 5 years. And this is message for NATO. Right in front of the NATO summit, any attempt to delay the launching of negotiation with Ukraine is very dangerous for the global security. And my point of view is that we can learn the lessons from that, because this is not only the biggest and the most modern children's hospital. Ahmadet was attacked, and I'm proud that it is my team who building it. My charity fund was investing in this hospital, but also children's hospital in other part of the Kiev was also attacked by missiles, and we have an injured and killed children. And this is just a symbol. What is with whom Russia is fighting? And with this situation, we're still waiting the invitation to NATO. We're still waiting the full supply of F-16, because this is the only efficient way how we can fight for against Russian air dominance. This is the air defense missile. This is just a demonstration that with the air defense missile, we protect the civilian, we protect children. And today, only today, 38 Russian missiles was attacked on Ukraine, and 30 of them was destroyed by our air defense. And I can guarantee you that if we will use it, we'll learn Israeli mode when the total coalition will protect, will close the sky above Ukraine. That would be the most effective way how to fight. And if we are looking for peace, security, and stability, Ukraine should be in NATO. If we are looking for defeating Russia and triumph of democracy,
Mr. Poroshenko,
it should be in NATO. Sorry.
Yeah, let me just get a question to you. It is exactly on that point about NATO. You'll know the summit is beginning a couple days' time. What would you like to hear concrete coming out of this summit? You'll know that the promise there of support will be there. There might even be a promise of more money. What right now would you like to hear concrete coming out of that summit once it gets under the way?
Please, this is not about the money, or not only about the money. Money is not allowing us to lose the war, but to continue the war. If you want to stop the war, it would be full membership. And as the results of the NATO summit, if we need to form one single word we are waiting, this word is invitation. And this is definitely in the interest of all member states in NATO. And Ukraine now, we Ukrainian soldiers, we Ukrainian armed forces, which was created by me, it is definitely fighting for all Europe. And again, if you want a peace, please open the NATO door for Ukraine. This is extremely important from NATO summit, the air defense, Patriot missiles, the long-range missiles without any limits for Ukraine, because Russia has no limits. Putin has no limits. And today, attack on the children's hospital is just a new evidence. Russia is a terrorist state, and we should treat them as a terrorist. And we should be extremely efficient, because with this situation, the toxic Russian terrorist danger would be distributed first on the continent and second globally.
I'm using my phone.
You talk about the Prime Minister of Hungary is in China, and Prime Minister Modi is due to be visiting.
Now, enough of the nonsense. What actually happened to the hospital? Let's see. This is what they're not showing on TV.
Epic footage of Russian cruise missile attack hitting a military factory in the center of Kiev on Monday, July 9, 2024. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, as a result of a group attack with high-precision long-range missile weapons, destroyed military industrial facilities and aviation armed forces bases at Savod Artem plant. Artem is a factory for manufacturing missiles, weapons and ammunition for the Kiev regime, stored at the company. About 5 Russian X-101 subsonic long-range cruise missiles, within 30 seconds of each other, came to the place, accompanied by repeated violent explosions in the factory, indicating the destruction of a large number of weapons and ammunition. A military command center was also reduced to rubble debris.
Now on the news, on all the news stations, they're not talking about the military command center and the big military weapons factory in Kiev. That the video is online, it's getting hit. But they're talking about this poor children's hospital, which RP those kids got hit. Yes, the kids' hospital did get hit by the Ukrainian air defense that couldn't knock out the Russian missiles, couldn't stop the Russian missiles, and they hit the hospital. Now, people should look into whether or not they hit the hospital on purpose so they can cry on the news, because Russia going to point out every time they don't have a summit, something like this happen.
In this case, Ukrainian war supporters disputed that Ukrainian air defense missiles hit an Akhmedid Children Hospital, which is not far from Savid Artem plant, and they blamed Russia for it.
Now, that's a war crime. That is a war crime for Ukraine to have any air defense systems in civilian populations, but the U.S. don't want to talk about that. That means you are using civilians as human shields, what they say Hamas is doing. When you have your weapons hidden within the civilians, yeah, you're using the civilians as human shields. That's what Kiev is doing. They doing that.
But according to several videos recorded remotely by eyewitness with high quality, it clearly shows.
Make no sense why you go to CNN, go to the news media. They probably gonna take this goddamn video down. They are not gonna play the video where the missile is hitting stuff. No, you're just gonna see a building later on. They're gonna say, "Oh, Russia did this. Why did Russia hit these children?" They know they lying.
The difference between Russian cruise missiles hitting a military factory and Ukrainian air defense missiles hitting a hospital. The image of X-101 missile clearly shows the center stub point corresponding to NASAM missile system, or the interceptor fired from MIM-104 Patriot missile system. Different backgrounds footage show of the arrival of X-101 missiles at Artem plant and missiles arriving at hospital. From a different point of view, everything is very clear.
You know, it's propaganda that Russia hit any hospital. That's a lie. You know, that's a big lie. Now, to show y'all the video of who hit what, which they don't want to show, but now we're going to have to go to the Russian. See, Russians, they got bold representatives. He just going to so peacefully and quietly go into the UN amongst the snakes and expose them for lying to the world, continuing to lie to the world, expose Ukraine and the West, knowing damn well Ukraine missiles hit that goddamn hospital, knowing it wouldn't be no hospital if the Russian missile had hit it.
I would begin by thanking France and Ecuador for convening this meeting. As is clear from the statements of Western colleagues, which are, by the way, very minimalist, the topic of the alleged Russian strike on the Children's Hospital, for the discussion of which they convened us today, clearly is not a very gratifying topic. And they probably saw many analyses of what happened on photos and videos, from which it clearly follows that this was a missile of the Ukrainian air defense. Here you get the magic of verbal gymnastics demonstrated today by Western members of the Security Council, trying by any means to protect the Kiev regime. For us, this meeting is an excellent opportunity to tell the truth about what actually happened. However, the truth, as is well known, does not interest our Western colleagues, and in the best traditions of the Bucha provocation, or with the Mariupol hospital, which was mentioned today, they tried to engage in wishful thinking by condemning the allegedly intentional strike of the Russian Air Force against the children's medical facilities. Now, the dishonesty of this tactic is clear to the naked eye, as was noticed immediately by the Ukrainians themselves, thanks to the video of the strike against the hospital complex, which appeared in the internet and negated all attempts by Kiev and Western propagandists. Here are the reference.
He's in there letting them know, shame on y'all for lying to y'all citizens and pretend like Russia at that building hospital, when the video was out and the whole world knows it was not a Russian missile, it was a Ukrainian air defense missile. And when you look at the building, you can see it wasn't a direct hit from a Russian missile, or like he's going to say, the missile would have killed everybody. It's a destructive hypersonic missile. No, that missile that Russia had hit its target, which is a military warehouse housing weapons and generals and all that type of shit. But U.S. media, EU media on TV lying. Putin's targeting kids, but just say Russia did target the hospital. The whole world right now, besides, it don't give a damn. Why? Because they didn't say one till when all them Palestinians were dying in them hospitals every day. We've seen all of the Palestinian hospitals have been targeted. Babies dying, cancer patients. Now, once again, here go to the U.S. They got morals again. Oh, the patient can't. Y'all don't give a damn about no patient kids. People with kids with cancer, cancer patients. Y'all don't give a damn about that. The whole world seen 15,000 kids died in Palestine. Y'all didn't say a moment word. But except Israel got the right to defend itself. But now all of a sudden, some so-called Ukrainian kids, they might be they Jewish too, a bunch of them. Now it's a big problem, but the world not buying it.
This is of the most full publication. These are QR codes.
Now, you see what he just did? Now that QR code he put up for the whole world. It take you right to the video of the proof that he in there with the proof. Say, hey, well, come on, y'all ready to look at something? Let's put this on the big screen right now. They all sitting there scared as hell. Please don't do that. No, he said, look, y'all want to look at the video? Y'all want to look at what really happened? They not scared? No, don't do that. He said, all right, I just put this in the evidence. So,
and here's what immediately after the event was published by Ukrainian Telegram channels, which remain the only uncensored source of information, uncensored by the Ukrainian authorities for their compatriots. And I quote, "The presidential office has instructed everyone to only publish and promote information related to the children's clinic Otmandet in order to A, divert attention from other issues, as there are interesting sites nearby where people could question the government about."
Now, the list that he's reading is some Russian KGB type shit. Zelensky passed a notice around to his Ukrainian government propaganda that they need to be telling each other to lie about what happened at the hospital. And he has the list and he's reading exactly what they're telling each other. That's why they scared in there too. They don't know who giving him this information. That's Russia for you.
Why military facilities are located so close to residential areas and hospitals. B, attempt to boost the morale of the army and the people by fueling hatred toward the enemy. They claim that the enemy intentionally targeted children, although everyone knows that the rocket was accidentally shot down. This is a quote. C, distract the masses from the daily lawlessness of the government, corruption, tariff increases, price hikes, growing disillusionment, etc. D, divert attention from the constant retreat of the armed forces of Ukraine. E, create additional reason for justifying the conscription in the name of Zelensky. And E, create a media hype in the Western press before the NATO summit. End of quote. Here's another quote. Regarding the strike against the Okhmandet children, it's quite clear it was a air defense of NASAMS that went off course and hit the children's corpus. Western air defense also often miss their targets, and most often the this happened when the air defense of the Ukraine hit Poland, hit a tractor. If the X-101 missile had hit the building, the damage would have been much worse. We all constantly write that Ukrainian air defense missiles often go off target. There was many such tragedies before, and the presidential office goes constantly lying to people that these were Russians who intentionally struck residential buildings. The presidential office has to constantly fuel hatred among Ukrainians and justify the continuation of the war by these artificial tragedies. And the military themselves acknowledge such tragedies are as a result of air defense. This is a quote from Ukrainian sources, it's not mine. Colleagues, I hope now you can understand that no matter how the Kiev regime and its Western sponsors tried to represent the tragedy as a result of an intentional Russian strike, even in the eyes of regular Ukrainians, the version does not hold water. and these conditions, we really regret that the Council has been drawn into this dirty propaganda campaign of Kiev and its abettors. And I'd like to ask Mr. Zhovner a question: how he, when he went into the street, understood that the hospital was subject to a Russian strike. Who provided this kind of information, which clearly contradict common sense? Does he understand that if this had been a Russian strike, there would have been nothing left of the building, and all the children and most of the adults would have been killed and not wounded?
Now, that is what everybody needs to really focus on. That is what we have gotten in this world, to where the media go right on TV, show you the building, show it's partly hit, slightly hit, and tell you a Russian hypersonic missile targeted. That's targeted this children's hospital. And they're like, come on, bro. It wouldn't be no hospital left. Everybody would be dead. But they know that people don't pay attention to details. People just want the information in short spurts. So, oh, Russian missile hit. They look at the building, people there. Oh, Russia, you so, what? Are you crazy? Like but he's in there with everybody. It's so-called supposed to be intelligent, and everybody supposed to be professional, and he's telling them to their face. You know goddamn well if one of our missiles hit that building, the building gonna disappear, and all of those people will be dead. Not some injured. No. Everybody will be dead. But you steady lying to your people. But even Ukrainians know that's a lie, because they the ones, regular civilians, released the video I played earlier of the air defense system of Ukraine hitting that goddamn building.
Wounded. But due to the fact that the screen has been darkened, I don't think we'll hear an answer from Mr. Zhovner. We have often stated that Russia does not strike civilian targets in Ukraine. And speaking of strikes of the Russian Air Force, which were conducted against military targets in Ukraine and the air bases of Ukraine, one of these targets is the factory of Artem, one of the largest enterprises of the Ukrainian defense industry.
Now, one of the largest Ukrainian military facilities that produced missiles and all kind of other armaments was hit. I showed in that video. Ukraine released it. It was hit. That was the facility Ukraine was trying to protect, but Russia shooting hypersonic missiles. You can't hit them. So guess what? What goes up must come down. You didn't hit nothing, but you hit the hospital instead. Ukraine hit the hospital instead, not Russia. But people that take us back to, and this is why they lie so much. It is a war crime to have your air defense systems in civilian populations. Ukraine not supposed to have air defense systems near that hospital, but they do. But the U.S. don't give a damn. But they say Hamas is using civilians as human shields. That is the definition of using civilians as human shields. What Ukraine is doing, hiding their weapons near civilians.
This is one of the main producers of aviation missiles, weapons, and ammunition. And this target, according to data based on objective evaluation and based on testimony of Kiev, of people of Kiev themselves, was hit. Since the factory is about 2 kilometers from the Okhmadet Children's Hospital, there's every opportunity to assume that the air defense missile was meant to intercept the Russian missile and which was meant to hit the factory.
That's what happened.
Now, such tragedies could be avoided if the Kiev regime, in contravention of international humanitarian law, did not locate air defense and heavy weaponry in residential neighborhoods. However, its Western sponsors prefer to look away regarding that important fact. We also can't fail to mention the fact that the Ukrainians themselves in the social media noted an interesting trend. The tragedy with the hit of the air defense rocket.
Now pay attention to what he's going to say.
Into the hospital, children's hospital, occurred on the eve of the NATO summit. And this is the third NATO summit since the beginning of the special military operation. And similar situations occur.
Now, what he finna point out is every time NATO finna have a summit since Russia started this war, did something like this happen. they need, and that's what make people think that they actually doing it on purpose. Why? Because they need to come on TV and get Americans and Europeans to feel bad for Ukraine and want to give them more money, take more of your money. So what do? Cause a scene like they just caused.
Occurred on the eve of each one of them. It was the same on the 27th of June of 2022 when Ukrainian media reported about an explosion in a mall in the city of Kremenchug in the Poltava Oblast, where supposedly hundreds of people were there. In actuality, the fire in the mall, which was empty and was not functioning, took place as a result of the detonation of ammunition which was held in a neighboring building and was provided by the US and Europe. The same thing happened on the night of the 6th of July of 2023 when the Russian Air Force delivered a strike against a temporary deployment of Ukrainian soldiers and foreign mercenaries in Lvov. And noteworthy that the mayor of Lvov, Mr. Sadovy, acknowledged that the buildings, residential buildings, were damaged by fragments of the air defense. In all these situations, these were maximally exploited by the head of the Kiev clique in order to beg for more weapons for Ukraine. It's an interesting tendency, isn't it? And it's quite noteworthy that
that make it more devilish. That what he actually is saying to their face, in this is a United Nations Security Council meeting, this serious business, what he's saying is that you didn't try to knock that, you didn't try to stop the missile. You absolutely intentionally pretended you was going to try to hit the missile, but then ran your missile into your own building to get more sympathy from the world, and then come on TV and say, oh, look what the Russians did. But they're going to be able to prove it didn't. But people not going to pay attention. Time going to go blow by, and they're going to take another $60 billion from us and say it's to give Ukraine better air defense to stop the Russian attacks. It's very devilish and it's very cynical.
Ukrainian media resources have also noticed this. And by the way, another question begs to be asked. And this is in relation to the words of the representative of Slovenia regarding the confirmed Russian strike against the Otmandet Children's Hospital. In videos posted by Ukrainian users, it's clear to see how one after another, without any interference, 5 rockets of the Russian Air Force strike the factory. Also, it's clearly seen that without any interference, a single rocket hits the children's hospital, a rocket of the air defense of Ukraine. It's impossible to mistake it due to the easily recognizable rocket fin assembly and other traits. How is it possible that Ukrainian air defense misses all 5 strikes against the factory, but hits the children's hospital?
I bet they won't play that on the news. What he just asked them. How is it possible that your air defense missed every last Russian rocket, but then you hit that hospital? It's more cynical than y'all think. You see, because they want people. What they got to fall back on is, oh, we accidentally hit the hospital trying to hit your rocket down. But what Russia is saying, no, you didn't. You didn't try to hit our rocket. You hit exactly what you were trying to hit, and then like clockwork, all the news media came out with the script.
Directly, maybe the representative of the Kiev regime can answer that question. We await also reaction from Norwegian authorities, who it would seem supplied the assembly NASAMS to the Zelensky regime. Did they authorize it to be used for a strike against the children's hospital? And also that it, in contravention of international humanitarian law norms, that it would be located in residential neighborhoods. Against that background, in line with instructions on how to conduct propaganda, the head of the presidential office, Yermak, had time to make a statement about the impossibility of negotiations with Russia. There's no doubt that the leadership of Ukraine will use today's situation as a pretext for the further ignoring the demands and aspirations of Ukrainian society and of all international society for a an attempt to find a peaceful solution to the crisis. And it's understandable, because in such a scenario, there will be no need for emergency military situation, and this will require holding elections. And the Kiev clique, which has lost all legitimacy, fears this more than ever, more than anything, acknowledging that the population has a very negative attitude toward that. This is why it prefers to sacrifice tens, if not hundreds of thousands of its own citizens who are sent into a senseless meat grinder. We, on our side, have frequently spoke in favor of beginning negotiations and ending hostilities. However, this must be a cessation rather than a pause in hostilities, in order to give which would give the possibility for Kiev to lick its wounds and rearm. Furthermore, the root causes of the Ukrainian crisis must be tackled. Without this, there will not be any sustainable and lasting peace. Our conditions for concluding the conflict were clearly stated by President Putin on the 14th of June at the meeting with the leadership of our foreign ministry. We value also initiatives of all states who are aimed at a genuine ceasefire and taking into account our legitimate concerns, rather than aimed at promoting propaganda operations such as a pseudo-peace conference in Switzerland. And as long as Kyiv and its sponsors remain deaf to the appeals of using diplomacy, we will continue to be forced to compel Ukraine to peace and eliminate the root causes of the current crisis situation through military means.
You said we're going to be forced to compel Ukraine to peace. Putin got soldiers, man. Putin got soldiers in there handling business for him, man. They ain't going for that, man. Exposing that Ukraine, you dirty bastards. He's saying they hit their own hospital. Not Cofield TV News Network is not saying that, YouTube community guidelines. I don't know what happened. I'm just a news station. We're trying to get to the bottom of this. But he's exposing. And like I told y'all, like the video I played, I bet you they will not play those missile strikes. It is video of the missile striking Ukrainian military sites and hitting that hospital. They're not going to play it because people have already busted them with those videos. So, the lies going to continue, and because they're going to rip us off for billions of dollars. This was to take more money from us and to get people to side with Zelensky and Ukraine.
And I want to kind of go through what some of the people are saying on there, but with this happening, I guess just last night for our time, lots of things going on here, because here's how the West is reporting it. Well, Gary's got some of that footage there, but the West is just outright saying Russia strikes children hospital. Not that they're reported to, not that they're rumored to, but that they did. But as I understand,
remember I said this, they're gonna regret rushing so fast to post this picture. They had to get something out there. It happened. They had to get something out there. They just couldn't say a building was hit and they didn't at least get a picture. This picture destroyed their whole lie. No way a Russian hypersonic missile does this to the building. No, it will obliterate that goddamn building. There's plenty of videos showing that. But just by them showing this, the gig was already up. But they didn't care. Just enough to, promote some propaganda to snatch headlines.
And well, actually, I know you've got some different views because I've seen some of your tweets and some of the other things you've done on other channels. But first of all, I want to show you a little bit what the administration is saying about this certain act. Here's John Kirby when he was asked about it.
Do you believe the timing of these strikes is meant to send a message to NATO ahead of this week's summit?
It's hard to draw a line, Mary, to that. I mean, sadly, this is par for the course for Mr. Putin to hit civilian infrastructure, and he doesn't care whether he's hitting hospitals or residential buildings. I can't draw the line that this is some sort of message. But look, I mean, as I said, what you're going to see over the course of the week is a very set of strong signals and messages to Mr. Putin that he can't wait NATO out, can't wait the United States out. Money. We're going to continue.
They're going to steal our money. They finna steal our money at this NATO meeting, which means NATO going to pledge more money to Ukraine. NATO don't have no fucking money. We got the civilians got the money. All of this right here is to take money from taxpaying citizens, and they let you know this is why we got to do it. We got to stop Putin. The hospital was hit. But when you understand the Ukrainians hit it, that just piss you off. They're just like, come on, bro. Quit scamming us.
Larry, even before you start getting into some of the forensics of why you can say with such confidence that this was not a Russian direct attack, I want to just point out from a military perspective, there is literally no value in doing some of this. Even if you took morality out of it and said someone has literally no moral code whatsoever, they just have a military they want to win, there is no value to doing this. It's not a shock value, especially coming at the 2.5-year mark of the war. It doesn't give any military benefit. It is 100% negative, because if they had done so, it just gets moral outrage. It fires up the other side and gives them more impetus to resist. So there is no value or reason why any nation would ever directly target a children's hospital. And of course, when you put the morality in there, that makes it even less likely so, because we haven't seen Russia do that certainly on any specific scale that I'm aware of since this war began. But you have some knowledge about why you don't think this was a Russian attack.
Yeah, well, I'm not even thinking. I know. I can see the video. So let's start with the fact.
Before I dug deep.
Russia launched, the Ukrainians say they launched 38 missiles. And the Ukrainians said, oh, we shot down 30 of the 38. Okay, I posted a video at my site. You can see 5 Iskanders coming in. And the profile of the Iskander, it has a certain wing configuration. And yeah, there it goes. You can see it coming down. There were 5 of those, and
this is what all Americans. You're supposed to get really pissed off when you understand they ripping you off and sending money to Ukraine after they had this NATO summit that's happening in America coming up this week or next week. This video, why CNN and MSNBC or BBC or Sky News or the German DW, why they not showing the video of the missiles hitting? Why they want to show you a building afterwards and say Russia hit this? Well, show us the missile. Let everybody see it, because it's all propaganda. They're not going to show you that shit. So you can see for yourself that, say, hold on now. Y'all didn't hit none of the Russian missiles. The Russian missiles, because they also don't want to tell you where those Russian missiles was going at. Remember, I've listened to the press conferences. I don't have to bring that to y'all. They say, well, Putin loves to attack civilian targets. They don't want to say, oh, in that video, he's attacking a military site, because they want to pretend like that's not what Russia's doing. They're just terrorizing Ukraine for no reason at all.
These explosions, they were targeting military facilities. Then there's a video that shows the missile that hit the hospital. It does not fit the Iskander profile at all. In fact, it fits the profile of a NASAM, a NATO supplied surface to air missile that's designed to be an air defense missile.
NATO supplied.
And it missed the Iskander.
So did NATO do that? Did NATO Black Ops air defense crew, did they hit that hospital before their summit? Because they knew they weren't going to shoot down none of the Russian missiles. We all know that's not happening. Now, did they pretend like they was going to hit a Russian missile, but then really aimed at what their real target was, that goddamn hospital? Because yes, it was a NATO's NASAM missile that did it, like he said.
And like, as William Tell, what goes up must go down, or Isaac Newton, the laws of gravity.
That's a fact.
Missile went up, missile came down, and it hit the children's hospital. We also know that it's not the explosion from that warhead on that particular missile is not big. And that's why there was such, the images of that hospital are, appear all devastating, except, no kids were killed. I think 2 doctors were killed. Very, very small number of people actually killed and wounded in what ostensibly would have been a Russian missile attack. If the Iskander had hit that hospital, there wouldn't be anything left. That's number 2.
Because you got to understand, the air defense missile is got enough explosives to hit a missile and explode it. The Iskander Russian hypersonic missile is used to hit hard targets, to blow up buildings, underground bunkers. It would have wiped that goddamn hospital off the map. Hold on. Revolutionary salute to our brother out of bondage for the $5 donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life, and I definitely appreciate the love, family. Salute.
What's really interesting is the propaganda of this, because the Russians launched this Operation Daylight. Why did they launch it in daylight? Because the sites that they struck in Kiev, military sites, factories that were involved with producing weapons and doing repairs, They wanted to kill day workers.
Now, that's the fact that got to be pointed out, because Russia hit energy facilities at night so the workers will be going home, so it won't kill that many innocent people. If you a guard duty, if you got night shift at the energy facilities, that's tough luck, bro. But what he just pointed out is something I haven't mentioned yet. They struck these military bases and this weapons warehouse in Kiev during the day to kill as many workers as possible. They don't want to bring that up, to kill as many people working on making weapons as possible also.
They actually hurt them. You know, in the past, they had done some stuff at night where there was no chance of killing workers. No more. Russia hit them in the daylight, number one. Number two, all of these reports from the West, I mean, it was flooded almost instantly. Same message. Oh, Russia's bombed this children's hospital. Russia's bombed this children's hospital. All right. I'll take you back over the last 7 months of Israel regularly bombing children's hospitals, regular hospitals in Gaza. You don't see that kind of coverage of that. Hell no. They ignored that. Or the attacks that Ukraine routinely has made on civilian structures in Belgorod.
Come on, man. Ukraine just,
cafes, theaters. They're not military targets. It's been routine over the last 2 years. And the West, not a word. So when I saw this coordinated campaign, you know, the Western planners probably thought it was a godsend to get it on the eve of NATO. Because, we can play this up that Russia's bombing the children.
It ain't a godsend. It's a NATO done it. They goddamn self. They served themselves up some propaganda for their NATO meeting. All they needed Putin was to do was attack, and then they shoot an air defense missile. They know they're not going to hit the hypersonic missile, but then they hit their actual target. And then they had all of their media outlets come out with the same message right on time. But it all done been exposed. But they don't care, because most of the population not going to get the research like y'all getting. They going to hear the BS, and they think Russia killed some kids at a hospital.
Children's hospital. Meanwhile, none of that news coverage was allowed to go. You can clearly see on the video at least other 5 major explosions in Kiev. And any journalist worth their salt would have said, what the hell was that? Where?
Yeah, in fact, Gary, let's just continue to talk. If you could bring that first one back up of the 5, because I want to highlight something that Larry said, because I independently got information from another military source, which pointed out really the same thing, that the warhead, I think for the Iskander, you may correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's 88 kilograms of explosive device, or maybe it's 150. I can't recall.
Yeah, it's actually bigger than that.
Like 5 times bigger than the NASM's missile. So he said it's about roughly the size of 2 155 artillery shells. So big, but not anywhere near as big as the Iskander. So you can see the massive, like that one right there, these massive explosions here. And note when we show the other video, when you see that NASM missile go by, number one, it's dramatically different than the missiles you're seeing there. You can physically see the difference in shape, size, fins, all that stuff. But then you see the other one go, and you see a little flash of light on a building next to it. You'll see
there it is.
Plays in fast motion. You'll see it's a relatively small explosion in comparison to what the other ones you just did. So clearly they're not the same kind of missile.
Right. Yeah. And this is not the first time that you've had damage done to civilian targets in Kiev by errant air defense missiles fired off by the Ukrainians. And what's astonishing is they're lying, the depths of their lies. Oh, yeah, we shot down 30 of the 38 Iskanders. Oh, yeah, really? You don't see them shooting down. You don't see them shooting down a single one in Kiev, not one.
Right.
You do see the miss.
They claim they got 30 of 38. Then how is it that they didn't get 5 in a row? I mean, that just doesn't pass the common sense test.
Yeah. I mean, look, this is the only thing NATO's
doing. They just telling us propaganda. The news, they should be ashamed of themselves. They let them lies get on TV. We shot down, but don't want to show the video of the hitting the targets 5 in a row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Come on, you didn't hit nothing. You didn't hit nothing except that goddamn children's hospital. That's the only thing that they hit was a children's hospital. You definitely didn't hit no missiles.
good at, lying, building a propaganda campaign. But see, and if this was just straight up news reporting, okay, straight up news reporting, the news would be the same whether it was a bomb going off in Kiev or in Belgorod or in Gaza. It would just, hey, there was this attack. But you can go on. There's on the Telegram channel, I saw one comparison that when the Israelis hit the hospital, the headline was, "Oh, Israel roots out Hamas fighters hiding in hospital," and the Russian title, "Russia murders children." You know, and it's like, okay, now we understand. Nobody's coming at this with any kind of objectivity. They've got an axe to grind, and it's entirely to gaslight
Nazi propaganda
the public into saying, "Oh, yeah, Ukraine has a chance. All we got to do is just let's give them some more support, and by God, Ukraine's going to roll to victory, just like Joe Biden's going to beat Donald Trump in the next debate."
Yeah, and just to perfectly transition here, let me show a graphic representation of exactly what you just said earlier today on MSNBC. When this guest was asked, I think his name is Ian Brzezinski, he was asked about the Russian attack on the hospital, and he said this.
Good to see Mika and Joe and Ann, of course. Let me just say that, you know, those pictures we saw, those were war crimes committed by the Russians. That is unjustified brutality. And at this summit, the key issue is how is the alliance going to respond? Will it present a strategy that will enable Ukraine to win quickly, decisively, and on its terms? And to your question, you know, does NATO have the resources to apply it? I'm not entirely convinced this summit is going to provide that.
Yeah, and he goes on to talk more about what they ought to do, what they ought to give, et cetera. But the bottom line is he's trying to manipulate that into justification for continuing the support. And he actually says, again, with a straight face, at the 2.5 year mark, are we going to support them enough to decisively win or something less? As though 2023 never happened, it never existed. And that just, I don't know. It leaves me without words how people can make this kind of statements, oblivious to what has happened, what is happening, and the balance of power between these two sides.
He's genetically predisposed to lying. So Ian Brzezinski is the son of Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was Jimmy Carter's national security advisor, and you know, a pretty good failure in that role. So Ian's continuing in his father's footsteps, and Ian's sister Mika, wife of, I guess, third wife of Joe Scarborough. So, you know, this, you know, in Washington, it's what we're looking at is a version of political military incest. You know, they call it incest, the game the whole family can play. So that's what's going on here. You've got this corrupt organization, and Ian Brzezinski he could be the poster child for it, because instead of telling the truth, instead of coming clean with the American people about what's going on, that, you know what, we've thrown billions of dollars. We've thrown HIMARS, Patriots, Abrams, Bradleys, Javelins. We're going to throw in some F-16s too, but it has not stopped the Russians. The Russians are bigger, they're stronger, they're better equipped, and they militarily outclass us today. But no, you can't say that, because if you say that, it is you're exposing the fact that the king is walking around, or the emperor is walking around with no clothes on, and that ain't allowed.
And here's the I guess the anguishing part. Well, one of the anguishing parts to me, anyway. You say Brzezinski may be the poster child, but he ain't the only child. Here's another child which is commonly saying these same kinds of things. Again, we go back to John Kirby.
You will hear a very strong reaffirmation by NATO allies this week about the fact that the alliance is definitely going to be in Ukraine's future. No question about that. And you're going to hear about what that bridge to NATO is going to look like more specifically.
Okay. you just laid out part of the reason why this is such nonsense about Russia being bigger, stronger, militarily. They got experience in this kind of war, which we don't even have, all that stuff. And we could add a whole lot to it on both sides of the calculation. Russia, its allies, Ukraine, its allies, their military industrial capacity on each side and how they're out of balance. And yet you have this complete and utter fiction that just ignores that entire calculation, doesn't even talk about that there's challenges, just said, yeah, man, even though NATO, by Russia's own account, is the reason we went to war, and many people have laid that out, you being key among many of them, that's what was the impetus for Russia to invade in the first place. And now then you're saying, instead of having any kind of talk about a negotiated settlement, like Viktor Orban, like Fico from Slovakia and Hungary, I'm sorry, some of the other, Bulgaria, Turkey, who are also NATO members, who are saying we want peace. Ignore all that. We want more war.
Well, listen, war is profitable for the United States. And we've discussed this before, that in terms of the human cost, the United States has hardly paid any human cost. Now, in saying that, I know that there are veterans out there who have lost limbs. They've suffered traumatic brain injuries. They've suffered really irreversible conditions that will plague them the rest of their lives. And so I'm not in any way minimizing what they've suffered. But the fact of the matter is, 98% of Americans are not affected by that at all. And so it's easy to support wars when you don't pay any price. What sacrifices? People aren't having to forego gas. They're not doing like, even during World War II, there was rationing because the United States turned all of its domestic production into war production. And so, people couldn't get a new car. They had trouble buying new tires, so there were real sacrifices that people felt. Not today. What happens is you buy stock in Lockheed Martin or General Dynamics or Raytheon or the variety of other companies out there that are making money hand over fist, particularly drone operators, drone manufacturers. That's the future. So that's where, all the money's going there. So these guys can say that because they're not being square with the American people, that we have no intention of living at peace with Russia. We want to destroy Russia because, number one, we find Russia morally repugnant. They don't tolerate homosexuality. They don't tolerate the LGBTQ transgender agenda. So we got to get rid of them there just for the social wokeness factor. They got all of this gas and oil and uranium and minerals and gold. Man, we want that. We got to have that. So we want to. That's what this is about.
Okay. I can see where the greedy factor of a to what you're talking about here, that those things exist in Russia and some here want it. It's inaccessible. You can't get it short of self-destructing with nuclear weapons. So there's some missing synapses here.
Well, what we're doing, and this comes back to my old outfit, the CIA, is mounting, has an extensive covert action plan in place, and it's supported by the Brits, and the Brits have their own, trying to sow dissensions and create disunity within Russia to tear it apart from the inside. Which, one of the reasons they launched were behind these terrorist attacks a couple of weeks back that took place in Dagestan and in Sevastopol. So you're trying to weaken the Russian government. You're trying to sow chaos. That's one of the reasons, the West, starting in 1999, were funding, providing financial support to radical Islamists in Chechen that were involved with an internal Islamic terrorist campaign against the Russian national government. Russians ultimately defeated. Putin oversaw that. But again, that was Western backed. You've had Western CIA's been encouraging Ukrainian dissidents for years, going back to 1949, to launch attacks, again, to destabilize Russia. So, you know, the Russians are looking at a subversion campaign against their government that's been backed and funded by the West. And what's fascinating is the West likes to complain that that's what Russia's doing to the United States. You know, it's not even on the same scale. Russia's been content really to stay at home and mind its own business. We're the meddlesome ones.
Well, meddlesome is a kind term that I might use some different terms about what's been going on. But I'm going to show you a couple of other things that people are saying, because that's those two aren't the only poster children. There's others. There's a lot of posters that we got to show you about today. Here's another one with former NATO Supreme Allied Commander Wes Clark, who should know better than this, who should know about what is and isn't possible militarily. But here's what he's saying: at the 2.5 years of the war, at the 75th anniversary of NATO, here's what we ought to do.
All the air defense these countries have that are not on the front line should be pushed forward to Ukraine. The second thing is you have to create ambiguity in Putin's mind as to what comes next. You can't simply say, here's what we won't do this, we won't do that. You've got to start talking like French President Macron has talked about creating ambiguity. Send those French aircraft in, put some French troops on the ground in Odessa, put engineers in there to help rebuild the energy infrastructure. Get engaged. Show Putin we mean it.
Okay, we mean what? Send in a few troops in there. What the hell does he think is going to happen? So I want you to answer two things based on that right there. We'll get one after the other. First one, let's look at from the Ukraine side. So if we did what he suggested there and send French troops into Odessa and engineers in to help the Ukraine side on the front lines, what is that going to have impact on the ground?
There's none. They're going to die. But that's all it's going to do is create more body bags going back to France. This is what people don't grasp. And I mean, you know, Clark, it's shameful. You want to increase ambiguity on the part of the Russians. So put yourself in the position as a Russian military planner or the senior intelligence officer for Vladimir Putin. If the West has created ambiguity, that means you're not sure what they're going to do. So what are you likely to assume? That they're going to bring you chocolate and roses and bottles of wine to say, oh, we love you? Or that they're going to attack you, that they're going to destroy you? With you got ambiguity, you're going to assume the worst. And once you assume the worst, that means you start acting in a way to counter that, which then escalates the threat, increases the likelihood of confrontation, which these morons want. And look, it would be one thing if we were actually, you know, strong enough, militarily competent enough to handle it, but we're not. That's what is so alarming about these guys. We can't even stop the Houthis in the Red Sea. And that's NATO. Wow, it's not just the United States. It's Germany, it's France, it's England. Hell, England can't even get its ships out of harbor. And we're going to take on Russia? People, stop this madness. This war fever that has infected us in this society is just, it's alarming.
Yeah, infected. There's no more accurate term to use on that. It is an infection. And if we don't get it treated, it could eventually prove fatal. Yeah. I want to look at the other half of that equation there. So that's for the Ukraine side, it wouldn't do anything. They wouldn't be able to succeed. But how would the Russians counter that? If that's exactly what happened, what would they do? Would they be afraid to attack the French troops?
Oh, no. In fact, they're already doing it. So that's one of the reasons there have been reports that they have hit both some missile air defense sites that have had, quote, Western advisors. So they're killing Westerners right now. And the West is going out of its way to cover that up. That's the other reason Russia launched these missile strikes in daylight, because sometimes the production activities in Ukraine, despite the rhetoric, it's not going 24/7. They're just working daylight hours, banker hours. Well, that's why Russia's hitting them in the daylight, because they're not just trying to destroy the infrastructure. They're going to destroy the workers now. And they recognize that several of those workers are these Western mercenaries, or they're sheep-dipped. They're intelligence officers that are working undercover or being presented as if they're independent. So Russia's stepping it up, and the pressure is just increasing all along the line. And I think they're really becoming more resolute with each passing day. That they're just saying, okay, they've recognized the West is intent on going to war with Russia. That's how they view it, and therefore they are preparing and acting accordingly.
That's not good news. You're going to have to forgive me. I've got an issue with my camera. I'm going to try to get that fixed while we're talking here. But let's look at the other half of this, and that is, what is the possible strategic reaction from Russia? So they see what's going on with NATO right now, but what is going to be the prospect of them either just continuing on with this methodical operation that they're doing right now, or might they launch something larger to try to actually gain a military victory?
No, I think they're content right now to bleed out, because they're not just bleeding out Ukraine; they're bleeding out NATO in Ukraine. But at the same time, the Russians have embarked on this, let's call it the charm offensive. So today you had India's leader Modi just into a 2-day love fest in Moscow. I mean, man, they were doing the bro hug, embracing. Putin was initiating it, man. He was known in the past as not being much of a hugger, but boy, they're hugging it out, and they're saying good things about each other. So what Russia's doing is it's building up its alliances and its relationships with people around the world, with North Korea, with the Chinese, with the Vietnamese, with the Indians, with the South Africans, with the Brazilians, going around the world. And so what's the United States doing with India? We're threatening them with sanctions. We're saying, oh, you're going to cozy up to Russia? Well, we'll teach you. You keep that up, we're going to impose sanctions on you. Well, how do you think that's going to be met with by the Indians?
I've already been paying attention. India has told the U.S. really to mind their business. They say they respect the United States, but they haven't forgotten that in the 70s, I remember studying about that war, that the U.S. and Britain were sailing up the Bengal River to help attack India. They've been wanting to break up India. They want to break it up to a bunch of different countries. They do not like no billion people, period, being no one nation. And it was the Soviet Union who helped India and helped India gain its ground and stay as a nation. They were trying to help Pakistan. India haven't forgot that. India will never forget that. Even though India has a problem with China, they haven't forgotten that the West really hate them, and they have got to keep a good relationship with Russia.
Indians. How would you react if the United States was, you're a foreign country and the United States is threatening you? You finally just say, hey, you can shove it. We're not your slave. We don't have to do what you say. So all of this is accelerating that it's not just on the military front. It is also on the diplomatic front, that the United States is becoming weaker by the day, partly by virtue of its, blind support for Israel, no matter what Israel does. And the fact that both Russia and China are strategically reaching out to these other countries and trying to create an economic alternative where they're no longer can be held hostage by the US dollar.
Now, I know that this October, I think it's October, there's a BRICS summit, which I understand 97 countries have been invited to. And the expectation is that some potentially significant number of them are actually going to join the BRICS to form what I think, Chas Freeman was on our show yesterday and said they're actually forming a genuine economic bloc that could threaten or at least provide competition to like the EU and just the Western views altogether. How serious of a challenge to the economic power of the West is that?
Oh, very serious. And the West is underestimating it by scad. So consider this. right now, in terms of global GDP total is like $101 trillion. That means all the countries in the world. Of that, the United States accounts for about 28% of global GDP. Oh, that's pretty sizable. But when you add the GDP of Russia, China, India, Brazil, South Africa, and let's toss in Iran because they're a new member, all of a sudden they're up around $58 trillion. So they're above double that of the United States. So
now,
right there alone.
Also, we showed yesterday a clip where Putin was saying specifically about the SCO and this BRICS summit coming up that they want to provide an alternative economic system and a counterbalance to the dollar. Now, even if they don't replace the dollar, because as you say, the U.S. economy is still quite strong independently, so it's not going to replace the dollar, at least not anytime soon. But talk, if you could, about the impact if it's even weakened and minimized from what it currently is. What impact would that have on American national or economic security?
Well, America's not as strong as it thinks, okay? Because of our GDP, of that $28 trillion GDP, 75% of it is from services, okay? So that means instead of manufacturing, where you're building a car, you're building a tank, you're building your Boeing, building an airplane that the wheels fall off of, that's a whole nother story.
Separate, yeah.
Yeah. But, you're building, you're digging gold out of the ground, or uranium, or oil or gas, you're producing something. 75% of ours is, hey, Danny, would you like to supersize that cheeseburger? We'll give you an extra order of fries and a bigger Coke. Service, okay? That's what our economy is primarily. It's service. Hey, can I get a tip for my, I gave you a nice platter of eggs. In China, the 27% of their economy is manufacturing. And when you add up all the BRICS nations, they're actually producing things or digging things out of the ground that other people in the global South want. The global South's not lining up to say, oh man, I can't wait to hire some accountant from Arthur Andersen to come sell me some consulting services. So that's what the United States has bet its future on, services. When our largest companies don't produce anything. Google, what does Google produce? Facebook? I mean, wake the hell up, folks, because who are we buying our uranium from? Oh, that would be Russia. We're sanctioning Russia. By God, we condemn what you do, but hey, please sell us uranium.
So what would that do to the U.S. economy if the dollar starts to get weakened? Because it's been the reserve currency. We can print dollars anytime we need to handle internal things. But if more of the percentage of the global economy is done on denominated besides the dollar, what impact does that have on our interest rates and everything else?
Hyperinflation. The inflation rate in this country would just go off the charts. People will find, and you'll literally see prices changing from morning to afternoon. I've lived through that in Argentina back in 1984, where they had this hyperinflation. Because if you go back to Argentina in 1976, 77, before the start of what was called the Dirty War, at that time, Argentines would climb on their planes in either Buenos Aires or Cordoba. I lived in Cordoba. They'd do a flight. It's an 8-hour flight up to Miami. They would do a day flight. They go to Miami to go shopping and then fly back to Buenos Aires or Cordoba. They're just for a shopping trip because their Argentine peso was so strong. It was a dominant. It was considered is equal to the dollar. Within 3-4 years, that currency had been so inflated that the tax you would have paid when you sold your house, let's say $1 million house, that a year later, that same amount of tax, that might buy you a Coke, a bottle of Coca-Cola, not a gram of illegal drugs, but not Hunter Biden's preferred snack. But that's what the United States is facing, that our supremacy with this dollar, because right now, man, we're riding high. Yeah, we are. The dollar has been, up until about 2 years ago, it was the thing. Everybody wanted it. but this war in Ukraine and the United States response in terms of both trying to seize Russian assets and impose draconian economic sanctions on them simply accelerated the push that both China, Russia, India, because they're all hearing the same message from the United States. You either do what we want or we're going to impose sanctions. And they go, you know what? We don't need that. You would not put up for a minute with a friend that every time you got together with that friend, they were criticizing you, telling you what to do, and attacking you. You would stop associating with that person. Well, guess what? The same kind of thing that happens in human relationships is happening on the international front. And the United States is weaker now than we were 2 years ago. And
okay,
I see that accelerating, not decelerating.
Okay, well, here may be an accelerant. Gary, do you have that clip I was looking for? The one for Biden talking about running the world? I can't see if he may have it in a second. Because there's a couple things I want to set up. I'm going to show you something I talked about actually earlier on a show today from something Nancy Pelosi published today in the Washington Post, an op-ed. And when I read it, I thought, man, I need to get Larry to weigh in on this. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. I'm going to show you some of the things that she said. But before I do that, though, I want to remind people this is something that President Biden said last Friday on George Stephanopoulos' show when he was interviewed, and he was asked, should you continue to run? Here's Biden's view of what the United States is supposed to do.
Not only am I campaigning, but I'm running the world. And that's not how it sounds like hyperbole. But we are the central nation in the world. Madeleine Albright was right.
We are the central nation of the world. We are running the world. And in this piece here by Nancy Pelosi, she is basically saying that NATO is a bulwark against tyranny, not a defensive network, like it was in 1949 against a legitimate military bloc in the Soviet Union, the Warsaw Pact, that held a balance of power between the two sides and prevented war for all those 40-something years. Now that it's this idea that's going to go after tyranny. And who does she lay out in direct, explicit form throughout at least half of this whole article? Belarus. So she's going to expand the target list from Russia to Belarus because he's a dictator. Ergo, we have to bring freedom to Belarus. That is an offensive action that is going on the attack. And I just want to ask, how do you think that the Russians and the Belarusians and anybody else in that part of the world is going to view a comment like that in light of what the president of the United States said?
Yeah, listen, they're not hearing impaired, okay? And even though we're speaking in English and their language is basically Russian, they don't have a problem with translation. They can hit Google Translate or whatever, and so they understand clearly what we're saying. And so they say, okay, the West is preparing to go to war for us, which is, that's one reason that this week Belarus was conducting military exercises with China. It's already got presence of Russian troops inside.
Nuclear weapons.
And so what we've seen is the destruction of 50 years of U.S. foreign policy where we tried to keep Russia and China away from each other, to divide them, because we recognize that if they ever came together and cooperated hand in glove, that it would represent a formidable power that we would be very hard pressed to defeat. And in fact, we can't defeat it. It's bigger than us, and we don't have the military capability anymore to do it. I saw there was one Western pundit who was arguing that, oh boy, China's going to face a hellscape off its coast with drones when the United States, decides to, defend Taiwan. And I'm going, how do people get to these positions and get to be this stupid? Because China outproduces the United States in drones by a factor of about 50. In other words, for every one we produce, they do 50. It's just from sheer volume. They overwhelm us. And yet, these clowns think they look at it only through this myopic vision that it's only the United States. That's all we have to worry about because we're the best, we're the greatest, we got the most money. Ignore the poop maps that you have to get in order to navigate yourself around San Francisco. That's a whole other issue. And the fact that you're going to get mugged on the streets in New York in broad daylight, yeah, that. Yeah, you can't ride the subways in New York City, but by God, we are great. We are strong. And it's like, just go ride the subways in Moscow, and then tell me how great and strong we are. They don't allow you to defecate and urinate in the subway cars in Moscow. Imagine that. They limit human freedom in that way. Okay, so we've set ourselves up for a confrontation with these countries. They're coming together. They're not pulling apart. It's not India and China and Russia all going in their separate directions. They're coming together. And then here's Belarus now getting threatened again. All right, they're man up. And our rhetoric, our tough talk does not match our actual capability. That's what people don't grasp.
And I mean, let's just look more fundamentally, even at the concept of, I mean, forget about the stupidity of adding a target list on there. The fact that you're trying to say at the 75th anniversary of NATO as a justification for why we need NATO, you're talking about going on the offense. I mean, Viktor Orban published a piece in Newsweek a week ago where he specifically said, hey, NATO used to be a defensive alliance, which he was good with. He agreed with it and believed in it. But he said, now we're wanting to go on the offense. That was before Nancy Pelosi justified his comments by what she wrote there. And now then you see Orban, you see Slovakia, Bulgaria, Turkey, 4 NATO countries at least that are on record publicly right before this alliance of saying, we need to talk about a peace thing. We need to talk about ending this war, not just providing a bridge to more war, which is all we're doing. And now Nancy Pelosi is advocating a new target list on top of that. How do we go from being a defensive alliance to try to bring peace to the world to now looking for dragons to go slay?
Hey, we need to have that enemy in order to keep justifying a defense budget that's approaching $900 billion. We're rapidly headed towards $1 trillion. Yeah. So let me ask you a question. See if you can go back and remember. Do you remember when you were first alerted that your unit was going to be deploying to Iraq?
100%. Never forget it.
Was it 1 month, 2 months, 3 months before? Was it a week?
It was in November 1990. So basically 6 weeks before we deployed.
Yeah. So you got alerted before you deployed, and then once you deployed, the war didn't kick off until January 16th. So I remember that because it was my wife's birthday. But people don't understand that while we talk military things, there's always that planning process that precedes it, where units have to be alerted, they get the warning order, then they have to start, gathering up equipment. They have to, pack the bags and get all the equipment ready to deploy. It's not a snap of the fingers. It's not a 30-minute sitcom. It takes a while to get moving.
And let me just point out that the only reason we could deploy within 6 weeks is because we were already intensively training for years about tank-on-tank warfare. So we were already ready for that kind of fight. Yeah. I don't think many of our guys are today.
Yeah, and that's that's the other factor here. And yet, right now, when we've got the lowest number of personnel active duty in the Army, it's now down to 452,000.
Yeah.
We're talking about engaging in at least 2 different theaters against land-based armies that are on defense. And when you consider that Russia's active duty personnel are now roughly 1.3, 1.4 million, and the rule of thumb in the past has been, hey, any attacking force needs to have about a 3-to-1 advantage to overwhelm a defender. Well, I'm not great at math, but I can multiply, 1.3 million by 3. That's 3.9 million. And we got 452,000. I think we're a little shy. Okay. Just a bit, got to step up that recruiting. I mean, come on, people. At some point, you got to step back and say, all right, whatever this plan is that we're following, it doesn't even make sense. It's like, you've seen that new Bugatti that they're selling, 4.5 million. It's like you or I said, yeah, I'll go out and put a down payment on it.
Yeah, and then I wouldn't be able to eat after that. But still, and look, I want to show you something else. Not many people saw this when it came out. We've had it on our show once before, but I think it bears repeating here because it really is a Western leader pulling the curtains back and saying we need to take a hard look at ourselves. And tell me if you disagree with anything this man says here.
Idén, ha az Úristen is úgy akarja, lezárhatjuk a nyugati civilizáció egy dicstelen korszakát. Lezárhatjuk a progresszív, liberális hegemóniára épülő világrendet. Barátaim, a progresszív, liberális világszellem úgy, ahogy van, elbukott. Háborúkat, káoszt és békétlenséget, összeomló gazdaságot és zűrzavart hozott a világra. Zűrzavart a nemzetközi politikában, elszegényedést a családoknak, romló közbiztonságot az utcákon és a tereken. Furcsa korszak és különös szellem volt ez. Beszéljünk egyenesen, ez a világrend olyan vezetőket termelt ki, akik nem valók vezetőknek, akik alkalmatlanok a feladatra, akik hibára halmoznak, és végül a saját vesztükbe rohannak.
And I just need to say it out loud. I mean, you're talking Joe Biden, Rishi Sunak before last week, Olaf Scholz. I mean, the list just can keep going on. These guys that are just Macron, just ignoring the realities on the ground, ignoring all these things that you've talked about so eloquently in this show and many times before. And they're just on this fantasy world. And now here's one leader, and of course he gets demonized all the time from the right, but he's not against the West. He's for the West and for his country, and he wants to see it get better. But until you're honest with yourself, there's no path forward.
Yeah, it'd be one thing, and this goes along with this embrace of this DEI culture, diversity, equity, and equality, where you eliminate merit and you promote people only according to physical characteristics that they have no control over. Whether you're born black or white, you didn't make that choice. It just that's what happens. But that you earn a right because of what you look like doesn't make sense. And so across the board with these leaders, it'd be one thing if they said, okay, I came into office, I reduced unemployment, I improved the average price income for the average American or the average Brit or the average French citizen, that prices went down, that you could point to prosperity, the crime decreased, but that's not what's happening. Anybody that looks at what has happened in the United States over the last 3.5 years, and I really consider myself more of a libertarian. I'm not aligned with any of the political parties. But for God's sakes, America is not going in the right direction where people feel that they can walk out on the streets safely. You get gangs literally descending upon gas stations, stores, looting them, running off. Nobody's punished. Criminals who commit crimes, they're released. And so you wind up with a lack of safety. And yet these people obsess about what's going on in other countries. And so if you look at the priority that's been applied by both Biden and then Rishi Sunak and now Keir Starmer, with the amount of money that they're devoting into Ukraine compared to what's going to their own citizens and their own improvements in their own country, I mean, it's shocking. And so you got to step back and say, why? I mean, what's driving this? Because they try to portray it that, oh, well, Russia's this incorrigible authoritarian state, keen on reestablishing the Russian Empire around the world, which is really rich in irony, coming from countries, of all the European countries, and the United States has been an enabler of it, of colonial empires. I was listening the other day to Matthew Miller at the State Department. It's outrageous that Russia would go into and take land that's not its own. Okay, hey, look, if that's going to be our principle, then by God, let's everybody live with it, which means United States start giving up Guantanamo, Puerto Rico, Guam, Hawaii for starters. And then let's talk to the American Indian tribes to see how much of the land that we took from them they want back. Oh, we don't want to play that. Oh, wait a second.
Yeah. No. Hang on.
Yeah. So the hypocrisy level on this stinks. And when you look at what colonial Europe did to the people of Africa, the slaughter of millions. I mean, we're not talking tens of thousands, we're talking millions. And even after that, they impoverish these countries. They don't, it's one thing to go in and say, hey, we're going to be your partners, we're going to invest, we're going to build up the wealth. But man, when you rape the countries and you take all the wealth out and you leave kids that are, 10, 11, 12 years old working in mines to harvest the minerals that are used to build Teslas. So the wealthy upscale Americans can drive it and feel self-righteous about what they're doing to prevent climate change. Please.
Okay, so in the remaining time we got left, so that's all that stuff is a description of the world that is right now, and what NATO is trying to proclaim and celebrate, etc. Here in Washington, just a few miles from where I'm sitting. But there is an election coming up in the United States, and we've seen a bunch of elections really shift the landscape in Europe, going back the last couple of months, especially. If Trump wins in this election, and with Biden's, significant problems that he's got coming up, and by the way, there's another potential landmine waiting on Thursday night when he's supposed to have a press conference where he has to answer questions at the end of the summit, which God only knows if he's going to get through that. But whether he does or not, the increasing likelihood is that Trump wins, and he will have a dramatically different view on this stuff. What happens to the world if he turns this stuff upside down and does some of the stuff he's claiming, like, I don't want to continue on with this war in Ukraine, I want to end it?
Yeah. Trump, to his credit, and I know this from a friend who was involved with the intelligence community and had regular access to Trump with briefings and on other issues. Trump was not favorably disposed to getting into wars overseas. He was very much against it. Now, the problem was his personnel selection. So he surrounded himself with the likes of Mike Pompeo and John Bolton and some of these other cats. And they were very insistent upon use of military power, military force. And so, there was it 2017, 2018, there was a claim that the Syrians had used chemical weapons again against the rebels. Now, it was entirely, it was not true. It was a lie. But we were looking for a pretext to step up the attacks against Syria because the war was not going well for us. And I know for a fact that, Trump resisted, but he was finally bullied into having to do that. And
interesting.
But I have a friend who was at the the military command center there in Qatar, and he got on the horn with his Russian counterpart and said, "Hey, so we're going to be launching 20 cruise missiles in 2.5 hours. It's going to this location. So you want to make sure that all your personnel and equipment are out of that location." That's what actually happened. Stage managed. We launched the missiles. We blow up a bunch of dirt and maybe kill some sand spiders. And if you've ever seen one, they need to be killed. But
I have, yeah.
But Trump is not one to necessarily start a war. He will in Israel. Set that aside. But when it comes to China and Russia, he's not interested in seeing how many Americans he can get killed. And I think, but the problem is he's surrounded by a deep state that wants to do that.
Yeah.
In the past, they benefited from it. And what frightens me is that because they've never paid the physical price, and they think that we're now protected by our oceans, that we won't suffer what the people of Ukraine are suffering. I mean, what the people of Ukraine are suffering now as a consequence of this war that we're aiding and abetting and encouraging is it's going to change the landscape for centuries in terms of human population. We saw it. Same thing happened in Paraguay back during the Chaco War. They lost so many men that it was, it affected their population growth for 2 or 3 generations. This is going to affect the Ukrainians for multiple generations.
Yeah, for generations for sure. Yeah. So on that happy note, well, let's. I think we'll bring this one.
A few minutes ago, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation officially announced that the combat crew of the Iskander missile complex destroyed 4 units of the American HIMARS multiple launch rocket systems, along with 35 Western military specialists, who carried out maintenance of these missile systems, as well as their direct control during operational use. It is reported that these Western military specialists were active duty soldiers and officers of the U.S. Army. Later, the Russian military department published footage of the destruction of these American multiple launch rocket systems and Western military specialists. As it turned out, a Russian reconnaissance drone detected HIMARS missile systems in the northwestern part of the Kherson region. The footage clearly shows how American multiple launch rocket systems are heading towards the settlement of Klapaya, Kherson region. The fact is that not far from this village, in the neighboring forest belt, there were special positions that were prepared in advance for these missile systems. The Russian military department clarified that it was from these positions near the village of Klapaya that these American multiple launch rocket systems struck not only the positions of Russian troops in the Kherson direction of the front, but also the civilian population of Sevastopol. So, the footage shows how a Russian reconnaissance drone is patiently waiting for all American multiple launch rocket systems to take up their positions. After all 4 HIMARS missile systems took up their positions and the process of preparing for the launch of ATACMS missiles began, the Russian military, using the exact coordinates obtained from the reconnaissance drone, launched a pinpoint strike at this place. The footage shows how the Iskander-M ballistic missile strikes the camouflaged positions of American multiple launch rocket systems, destroying not only these missile systems, but also the serving military personnel. It is reported that just a few minutes after that, another Iskander-M ballistic missile also struck these enemy camouflaged positions. This was done in order to finally finish off the enemy forces in case someone, by some miracle, managed to survive the first missile strike. Later, objective monitoring data confirmed the complete destruction of all 4 HIMARS multiple launch rocket systems and 35 Western military specialists. At the same time, it is worth noting that on the same day, southeast of the village of Klapaya, the Russian military also destroyed another group of American HIMARS multiple launch rocket systems. According to the Russian military department, this time the Iskander ballistic missile destroyed 2 HIMARS missile systems and 5 escort vehicles, which also contained Western military specialists as well as fighters of elite special forces, who guarded these missile systems. The footage clearly shows the moment of destruction of these missile systems and the Western military. Thus, within 24 hours, the Russian army managed to destroy 6 American multiple-launch rocket systems, including dozens of highly qualified experienced Western military personnel. In addition, Russian ballistic missiles also hit and destroyed a classified meeting place of the command staff of the armed forces of Ukraine, among whom were also representatives of the North Atlantic Alliance. It is reported that this classified meeting place was destroyed in the northwestern part of the Kherson region. According to preliminary data, as a result of this missile strike, 20 high-ranking officers of the armed forces of Ukraine and NATO, who were directly involved in planning missile attacks on the Crimean Peninsula, were killed. The Ukrainian authorities and their Western patrons are still in a state of shock from the massive Russian missile attack that took place on the night of July 8. According to preliminary data, as a result of this attack, the Russian aerospace forces launched a massive missile strike on almost all regions of Ukraine, including its western part. However, before showing you the consequences of this massive missile attack, I would like to start this video by discussing with you the destruction of the 15th in a row of an American Abrams tank. It is reported that this combat vehicle was destroyed near the village of Valkia, in the Avdiivka direction of the front. So, a few minutes ago, the Russian military published very interesting footage, where the destruction of another American Abrams tank is clearly visible. As it turned out, this tank was discovered near the village of Valkia, by a reconnaissance drone of a unit of the Russian group of troops under the designation center. Immediately after that, the Russian military sent several FPV drones towards the American tank at once. The footage shows how, as a result of the first impact, the Abrams tank received serious running gear damage, and oil began to leach out. At the same time, the tank crew tried to save the combat vehicle by taking it away in a westerly direction. However, as subsequent events have shown, such actions were not enough to save a valuable combat vehicle. Russian drones tracked down an American tank and finished it off in a wooded area, where Ukrainian militants were trying to hide this combat vehicle. The footage clearly shows how 4 Russian FPV drones, one after another, hit an
y'all let me back in. It kicked me out. I have to fight to get back in here. Revolutionary salute. Let's see. All right. See if we can finish this stream without this internet failure again on us. I'm running off my Wi-Fi, y'all, on my phone. Still no internet service. All right, let's finish. All right, yeah, let's finish this video. Let's go to where we was at. I don't know where we was at.
Such regions of Ukraine as Odessa, Kirovograd, Nikolaev, Chernihiv, Zhytomyr, Dnipropetrovsk, Kharkiv, Poltava, Donetsk, Cherkasy, Vinnytsia, and Kiev were subjected to massive missile strikes. It is reported that the air alerts sounded on the territory of all Ukrainian regions throughout the day. It is known for certain that during this attack, Russian forces used various types of missiles, including hypersonic ones. At the same time, it is worth noting that most of the missile strikes were carried out against the capital of Ukraine, Kiev. In addition, it is also worth paying attention to the fact that Russian missiles did not attack their targets immediately. It is reported that they were circling over Ukrainian cities and struck at the most unexpected moment. Most likely, this was done to deplete the Ukrainian air defense systems. So, in the Odessa and Nikolaev regions, Russian Kh-101 cruise missiles hit and destroyed about 8 classified NATO warehouses. As a result of this attack, a large number of 155mm ammunition, ATACMS missiles, and 3 units of HIMARS multiple launch rocket systems were destroyed. In the Kirovohrad region, Russian caliber cruise missiles struck the Kanatova air base. In the Zhytomyr region, caliber cruise missiles caused maximum damage to the Ozernoye military airfield. In the Dnipropetrovsk region, near the town of Pavlograd, Russian Iskander ballistic missiles struck and destroyed an industrial area of a local chemical plant, as well as several weapons depots. In addition, Russian ballistic missiles also hit the training ground of the armed forces of Ukraine, as well as the local airfield, which is one of the largest in Europe. In the Chernihiv region, Russian Tu-22M3 strategic bombers, using Kh-22 cruise missiles, struck and destroyed the place of the deployment of the personnel of the armed forces of Ukraine, as well as several operating locations of air defense systems. In the Donetsk region, Russian missiles hit and destroyed industrial workshops on the territory of the Novokramatorsk machine building plant. In the Kharkiv region, near the city of Kharkiv, Russian Kh-22 cruise missiles struck and destroyed military equipment and personnel of the armed forces of Ukraine. In the Kiev region, and in the city of Kiev itself, monitoring services recorded the largest number of explosions. Moreover, as it turned out, for the first time during the war, the Russian military fired dozens of Kinzhal hypersonic missiles upon the Kiev region. It is reported that even though the air defense systems in Kiev worked non-stop, they failed to shoot down even one Russian hypersonic missile. According to local monitoring services, about 3 Kinzhal hypersonic missiles hit Kiev International Airport. As a result of this attack, several combat helicopters were destroyed, as well as one Patriot air defense system, along with a combat crew. It is reported that these were active duty soldiers and officers of the US Army. Russian hypersonic missiles also hit the Artyom plant, situated in Kyiv itself. As it turned out, the Ukrainian and NATO military stored a large number of weapons and ammunition on the territory of this plant. By the way, all the statements of the Ukrainian General Staff that Russian missiles hit a large number of civilian buildings in Kyiv do not correspond to the truth. As it turned out, all these civilian buildings were hit as a result of unsuccessful launches of Ukrainian air defense missiles. For example, in this photo, a Ukrainian air defense missile is clearly visible, which went off course and hit the building of a medical institution in Kyiv. Against this backdrop, Ukrainian telegram channels and military experts called on the Kyiv authorities not to place defense production facilities within the boundaries of large cities.
That's a war crime.
In their opinion, Ukraine should completely stop producing weapons on its territory and move its factories to neighboring countries. Ukrainian experts are confident that only after that, Russian massive missile attacks on the territory of Ukraine will stop.
BRICS financial system. That means that more of the world's money will just go around the US economy that is already limping, in pain, and insolvent. Now, why are they doing that? Because the US, we did it to ourselves. We sanctioned our way out of the game. Talk about shooting yourself in the foot. Now, over the weekend, speaking at the 12th World Peace Forum in Beijing, the Russian ambassador to China, Igor Morgulov, said this: "We are leaving the space dominated by the dollar and developing mechanisms and tools for a truly independent financial system. Its creation is not possible in the near future, but the steps taken in this direction are obvious." Now, he said that the countries that are game for this new system outside of the US dollar are Brazil, Russia, obviously, India, China, South Africa, Ethiopia, Iran, and Egypt. We've also seen interest from other countries such as Argentina. Now, why would they do this? Well, because the US has not been a neutral arbiter of international trade. On the contrary, we're a bully. Here's what Russian state media TASS says, that the US uses sanctions and dollars as a weapon for political goals. That is true. The quote at the bottom, he says, "The United States and its allies use illegal unilateral sanctions as a tool of coercion against those like Russia who do not agree with the use of the dollar as a weapon to achieve political goals." Now, it's hard to argue against that. We, in fact, do this, even though it's against our better interest. Why? Well, recently, Representative Thomas Massie told Tucker Carlson that being the world's currency allows us to survive this incredibly high national debt that we run on this clock behind me at this very moment, right? Why can we operate with a national debt like that? Because of our privilege of being the world's currency. But we don't take that privilege very seriously. We weaponize it. And if we don't stop that, then we have to actually deal with this debt behind me. Here's how he explains it. Watch.
Right now, we're able to finance it because we're the world's reserve currency. Right. And when we print more money, which we're doing all the time, the Fed is doing that, we're actually taxing the world. Everybody in the world who holds dollars gets like a 3% transaction fee. I say we're kind of like the credit card at the gas station that gets 3% because you're using that credit card. Right. Well, we get 3% from inflation we cause because the world is using our currency. And we can do that as long as they use our currency. But I think it's going to end. At some point, they're going to quit using our dollars as reserve currency. I mean, I watched your interview with Putin, and one of the things, whether you hate him or not, one of the things he said that is true is when we sanctioned him, before we sanctioned Russia, 70% of their transactions were in US dollars. And after the sanctions, it's less than 20% of their transactions are in US dollars. So what we're doing with all these sanctions, ironically, we're shooting ourselves in the foot every time we sanction a country and say you can't use our currency to have a transaction. We're taking away our ability to charge them 3% for that transaction, because when we print 3% more dollars, we're just taking that money.
And we're also sending a really clear signal, which is the dollar's not safe for you.
Right.
It's the reserve currency because it's a safe haven, because it's a stable country. It's the most stable country in the world. And we're not going to weaponize the dollar because that would be shooting ourselves. But suddenly we are.
And they'll tolerate like 3% because we're not backed by dollars, we're backed by aircraft carriers right now. So they'll sort of tolerate that 3%. But one of the things we recently did in Congress, we passed something called the Repo Act, where we said we're just going to seize all of Russia's sovereign assets in the United States. Well, it turns out a lot of that is treasury debt that they've agreed to buy so that they can hold dollars. And here's the problem with that. When people see that we've seized their money that they gave us in exchange for these treasury notes, then other countries won't want to buy our debt. It's already happening. And the price of a long-term bond that the treasury puts out it's already gone above 4%. It's like over 4.5%. And they don't want to buy them anymore because, we probably wouldn't seize Great Britain's assets, but I could see us seizing China's assets.
Why that seems like theft. Just like take a country's assets. That belongs to the people of the country, right? It's not just Putin.
It is theft. Like, it's immoral. But even if you're okay with the amorality or immorality of it, it's short-sighted because eventually it'll catch up with us.
So do any of the dumbos you work with understand that? Did you say, wait a second, if we do this, first of all, it's wrong. And if we're going to be a beacon of light and order and justice in the world, we should abide by those principles. But even if you don't care about even if, as you said, you're amoral, like, it's self-defeating to do this. Do they understand that?
Some of them understand it, but it doesn't matter. They'll still vote for something like the Repo Act anyway because it's popular.
Okay, so that popular bit, it really blows my mind because that means that your elected representative thinks that you want them to bully other countries and hurt our own economy to be the hegemonic world power. Do you? If you don't, you should tell them. And in fact, look at the numbers. When Russia actually began the conflict in Ukraine, they had $650 billion worth of U.S. reserve. And the U.S. said, we don't care. We don't care if they hold that for us, and it does well for us. We're playing politics. But Russia knew that the U.S. might do this prior to the war, so they started selling off dollars and stocking up on gold. Do you know that now they are the world's 5th largest holder of gold, worth about $140 billion? Well, that used to be us in the United States. Before World War II, we actually had 40% of the world's gold before we messed that up. Messed with a different word, if you know what I mean. And what do we have now? Air. We have a belief system. We don't even know how much gold we have. We have nothing.
We have debt. Yeah, that's how we operate. We don't even have air. We have debt. We have a negative version of air.
Right. So again, we've gone over this story about the Fort Worth and the gold collection. It's really good. We'll do it another time if you want, because it's a crazy story that seems like it should be on Netflix, but it's real. So again, the US dollar became the world's currency. And, there were warnings about this all along. We chose to ignore them. When the US became the dollar became the world currency, that happened in 1944 at the Bretton Woods Agreement. But in the 1960s, a Belgian-American economist named Robert Triffin warned about exactly what is happening. And I think it's worth reminding ourselves of what the Triffin dilemma is. This is from Carol Roth's most recent book, You Will Own Nothing. The Triffin dilemma from Robert Triffin acknowledges the challenges of the country that issues the world's reserve currency between balancing the interests of policy that benefit their domestic economy with the responsibility of keeping that currency as good as gold for the countries around the world that depend on its stability. So we've taken that good as gold and we pissed all over it. That's basically what we've done, because the world has to trust you if you are going to be the world's global reserve currency, and we don't care. So we cannot balance. You can't serve two masters. That's what the Triffin dilemma is. We've been warned about this now for almost 50 years and have done nothing about it. So this is exactly where we are. We are playing politics, and it is we're hurting ourselves. That's why we have this terrible inflation. We are leaving ourselves out of global progress. And the rest of the world is saying, we're done with their games. We're going to work around them now. We've been warned. We're hurting ourselves. We're still doing it. So let us know what you think of that.
First, this. You all know that I am a paid spokesperson for friend Pepe. Welcome back to the show. Always a pleasure to have you on and to be able to pick your brain. You've characterized the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting last week as a game changer. There was barely a peep about it in the Western press. Are you surprised that the West ignored it? Second question, what happened there that it's a game changer?
Well, first of all, Judge, greetings from Southeast Asia, Thailand, after sunset, the coolest part of the world.
All right, this is the hottest part of the world. The sun is coming up. It's going to be 95 degrees Fahrenheit here in a few hours.
Well, here is always at 28 to 32 Celsius the whole year.
Wow.
Okay, very, very important. I was not surprised by the non-coverage of the SCO summit in Astana, Kazakhstan, in Western media. Not only in the US, but across Europe as well. First of all, because the collective West does not understand what the SCO is. The SCO was founded a few months before 9/11, in fact, as the Shanghai Five. It was Russia, China, and 3 Central Asian stands, essentially as a anti-terrorist, anti-separatist, anti-extremist organization. And all these years, they have developed as an economic cooperation organization. And now they are one of the key nodes of the multinodal world, which is a better definition of the multipolar world. Different nodes, they are interconnected. And this was more than clear at the summit last week in Astana. We had the 9 members of the SCO, which include, by the way, India, Pakistan, and Iran, and the 10th, Belarus. So now it's the SCO 10. And this is very, very important because we have on the same table Russia, China, India, Pakistan, Iran, Belarus, and 4 Central Asian stands. That's a great deal of Eurasia, in fact. And
is it fair to say that that is about 80% of Eurasia and probably about 40% of the world's population?
Absolutely correct, Judge. Absolutely correct. So, which makes it even more extraordinary, the fact that the SCO, well, has always been ignored by the West. Years ago, when I was writing about the SCOs, some of the sessions and roundtables at different forums across Eurasia, even the people at Asia Times, I used to work with Asia Times based in Hong Kong, they had no clue what I was talking about. And readers, they didn't know, especially the readers in across the West, they had no idea. And now we can more or less say that it's the sister organization of BRICS 10. So we have BRICS 10 and SCO 10. And don't forget that four very important members are members of both Russia, China, India, and Iran.
All nuclear powers, no?
Apart from Iran, Judge.
Right, Iran, I guess, is getting there.
I beg to differ, because, of course, there are lots of completely unfounded assertions that Iran is a nuclear power or on the brink of being a nuclear power. That's not correct at all. And as far as we know, the latest from Ayatollah Khamenei himself, the supreme leader, a nuclear weapon is un-Islamic, and Iran will not pursue a nuclear weapon. This is
very interesting.
Yes,
in your article about this being a game changer, you have a lot of very interesting points. One of which is the BRICS, the SCO view that the West is ignoring international law, that the West can't be relied upon to comply with the rule-based order that the West attempted to establish.
Absolutely correct. And that's why one of the key discussion points in Astana was something that President Putin, in fact, the notion was officially introduced last month in June at a meeting of Putin with the creme de la creme of Russian diplomats, the notion of new Eurasia-wide security architecture, which is essentially the content of those letters that Russia sent to Washington and Brussels in December 2021, talking about indivisibility of security. It's exactly the same thing. Basically, the Russians are saying, and the Chinese agree, and the Indians also agree, more subdued, but they also agree. Look, the system, the rules-based international order based essentially on NATO being a sort of Robocop of the whole planet doesn't apply anymore. It's Western-centric, NATO-centric, and Eurasia is completely ignored. We proposed a Eurasia-wide, indivisibility of security system, where countries from NATO and Europe are also welcome. Don't forget that if we look at the map, basically Europe is the western extremity of Eurasia, or a peninsula in the wider Eurasia continent. So this cannot possibly dictate security to the whole, to the, let's say, the big Eurasian panda, from Turkey all the way to Vladivostok. And it makes sense that security for the big powers in Eurasia should be inextricably linked to the security of Europe as well. But
you mentioned Turkey. Turkey's not in SCO, are they?
They are very interesting, Judge. At
the present time, they're not in.
At the present time, you're right. They are a dialogue partner. And guess who was in person in Astana? Erdogan himself.
Oh my goodness!
He went.
A NATO member at SCO.
Exactly. So we have a NATO member. Theoretically, the most important NATO army, apart from Ukraine, which is not NATO, but for all practical purposes, it is NATO as well. At the SCO summit, visibly interested in this concept of Eurasia-wide security architecture. He had a bilateral with Putin on the sidelines of the meeting. He was in all the main sessions as a dialogue partner. Azerbaijan was there as well. Very, very important. And with the observers, including in the observers, also extremely important, Afghanistan, because the SCO wants to bring Afghanistan as a full member as soon as it's feasible, let's say within the next 2 years or so, because then the normalization of Afghanistan and the stabilization of Afghanistan is going to be an Eurasia-wide movement. This is something absolutely extraordinary, which I had the chance to discuss in Moscow, but also when I met the Taliban delegation in Doha less than 2 months ago. And they are very much interested in normalizing Afghanistan inside the SCO. And at the St. Petersburg Forum, on top of it, guess what? There was a Taliban delegation, which was being, the Russians were working the room, by the way, full room. They were introducing the Taliban to virtually everybody. The Ministry of Labor of the Taliban was there. He was on the same table with Sergei Glaziev, talking about Eurasian integration, something that we would never imagine would happen. So this is how fast the whole thing is evolving. And one of the main points of discussion, once again, very important, is which everybody, all the SCO 10 agree, and the dialogue partners also agree. We need a new indivisibility of security system, all from Europe to the whole of Eurasia.
Okay, so tell me what that means. Indivisibility, security architecture for all of Asia. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that landmass.
Absolutely, the landmass. So we can see in the map. This goes literally from Lisbon to Vladivostok, or from Lisbon to the Koreas.
Wow.
So this is the whole of Eurasia. And you have the rimland as well.
From the southern tip of India to the north to the Arctic Circle.
You're absolutely right. And where I am here, Southeast Asia, it's part of the rimland. India is part of the rimland as well. Southern Iran, the Persian Gulf, is part of the rimland. Yemen is in the rimland as well. So if the US and NATO don't wake up, which probably they won't, right? They lose, they run the risk of losing not only the whole of Eurasia, but also significant parts of the rimland as well. The heartland and the rimland at the same time within the next few years. It's a very few, because the way Eurasia is being uniting under the edges of these different multilateral organizations, BRICS 10, SCO 10, the Belt and Road, the Chinese Belt and Road projects, the Eurasia Economic Union, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, all of that together, they're going to the same place, which is, let's say, a unified Eurasia. This visit of Modi to Russia yesterday and today, it's part of that as well. Yes, go ahead, please.
As we speak, NATO leaders, heads of state and foreign ministers are arriving in Washington. Washington, of course, is a mess. It's a swirl with the Democrats telling President Biden to withdraw from the campaign, and Democrats supporting him, and him insisting he's not leaving. So this is obviously foremost on his mind. But do you think these leaders in the West, and one of them, I guess, is at both, that is, Erdogan was at Shanghai, and now Erdogan's going to be in D.C. Do you think they grasp what is happening between BRICS and SCO?
No, they don't, Judge. And you can tell by reading think tank reports, or my inbox is full of this crap every day. And I have, for professional reasons, I have to know what they're thinking or what they're publishing. They have no idea. For instance, this morning I was reading an article by Carl Bildt, former Prime Minister of Sweden, Foreign Minister of Sweden as well, talking about Russia in terms of Russia is the aggressor in Ukraine, and you cannot allow Russia to win, because then they're going to invade. Putin is going to reconstitute his empire and invade Europe. So this is as far as they go. They cannot see all these different Eurasian powers uniting and in different multilateral organizations and establishing the new rules, in fact, and respect. They always are very, very keen on emphasizing the UN Charter and international rule of law, which is the complete opposite of the rules-based international order. Yes, that's the photo of the 10 plus some extras as well. But Erdogan is in the picture. Absolutely.
Yes. Where is SCO on Palestine?
They, in their official statement at the end, very, very weighty, they condemned they didn't use the word genocide, of course, that's too leaden, but they affirmed the absolute necessity of a Palestinian state. Well, this is the official position of all of them, in fact. Some of them don't express it so bluntly, but for instance, Russia, Iran, China, they do. And even Turkey, which is an associate partner. So it's very important because they see what's happening in against Palestine and the genocide as a whole as an extension of the rules-based international order, because it's twisted by the empire to justify the genocide. So this is completely against the UN Charter and completely against the rule of international law.
You write that among the goals of SCO is the gradual phase out of external powers in Eurasia.
Exactly.
Correct.
You know exactly what that means.
You also write that I'm sort of projecting now that SCO and BRICS will become one because the purpose of this is to provide alternatives to Western-controlled economic mechanisms. That's BRICS and SCO, no?
There's a strong possibility, Judge. We cannot say that they are going to merge. Lukashenko, which is now a member of the SCO 10, he has been saying that since last year. No, it's inevitable that the BRICS and the SCO will merge. If we follow the speed of how they are interacting and the fact that we have 4 top powers as members of both organizations, it's more or less inevitable that they will sit on the same table within the next, let's say, 2 to 3 years.
Would BRICS and SCO consider military action to abate the slaughter in Gaza and the contemplated slaughter in Lebanon?
No, because they are not structured as military organizations. They are not NATO. People who don't understand the SCO in the West, they say, this is the Asian NATO. No, it's not a military organization. It started as an anti-terror, separatism, and extremism of all kinds organization and evolved into a economic cooperation organization, which is what it is today. And for instance, they spent a lot of time in Astana discussing transportation corridors, which is essential for all of them. This is geoeconomics, essentially.
Do you think that MI6, CIA, and Mossad were there last week?
You know why they were, because they are very active in Kazakhstan. My last time in Kazakhstan was in December, only a few months ago, and we know it's very touchy for a foreigner to discuss with Kazakhs about Western agencies' influence in Kazakhstan. But in a very polite, indirect way, they pass the message that, yes, of course, they're here and we know what they're doing. And not only they are in Almaty, which is the business capital of Kazakhstan, but they have their cells in Astana as well, the center of power. And they are following very closely the internal political disputes in Kazakhstan, and the fact that Kazakhstan's neighbor Kyrgyzstan is very volatile, much smaller, very volatile. And Kyrgyzstan, you find a lot of working for MI6 extremists of all persuasions. So it's an extremely complex and volatile region. And part of the, the super objective of the SCO is exactly we have to control these supported by CIA, supported by MI6 terror networks, or this, let's say, foreign legion of terror across Central Asia, especially Kyrgyzstan because of the Fergana Valley and Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. Tajikistan is very, very fragile, and the border with Afghanistan. So, to remind everyone once again, the terrorists that perpetrated the Crocus attack in Moscow a few months ago, they were Tajiks recruited online by a preacher in Tajikistan.
Wow.
So that's why the SCO has to pay attention to all these permutations of terror.
I want to ask you, before we go, some questions about the latest in Ukraine. But before we do, another last question on SCO. If you had been there last week and you could have asked the leaders, what is their opinion of Pax Americana, what would they have said?
We know what the Russians and the Chinese would say. We are working in our comprehensive strategic partnership to end Pax Americana. India is more nuanced because, for instance, Modi didn't go to Astana because Modi was preparing his trip to Moscow, Monday and Tuesday this week. So he sent Jai Shankar, the foreign minister, which is an extremely well-prepared guy. He would have said, not that India is interested in the end of Pax Americana, but India is interested in a multipolar system of international relations. That would be the diplomatic answer. Okay. And the Central Asians would ally with Russia and China with nuance as well. Kazakhstan is very complicated, Judge, because Kazakhstan, there's a lot of American investment in Kazakhstan, especially in the energy business. And Kazakhstan is, they try to be a sort of messenger between East and West. They have very good relations with China because they are part of Belt and Road programs everywhere. The very sensitive Kazakh border with Xinjiang is something extraordinary. I was there a few years ago. It's amazing. You have 3 different borders for trains, for passengers, for buses, and this is where everything that leaves Xinjiang crosses Central Asia to go to other parts of Eurasia and to the West as well. So they need very good relations with China. Tokayev, the prime minister, he speaks fluent Mandarin.
Wow.
So,
wow.
So all that. So there's a lot of integration. At the same time, they need to pay attention to Chevron. They need to pay attention to American energy companies. They need to pay attention to the fact that a lot of American business are in Almaty. So it's equilibrium.
Got it. The American newspapers this morning are filled with speculation about whether Joe Biden will stay in the race for re-election. The other major story is what the Western press is portraying as a Russian attack on a children's hospital in Kyiv. Do you have an understanding of what truly happened there at the hospital?
Well, the Russians were attacking the Artem factory, which is very close to the hospital. The Ukrainians sent, Ukrainian air defense sent a missile, and guess what? It landed on the hospital. It's an AIM-120AD missile, Ukrainian. And obviously, Zelensky. He said, I'm quoting him, in Ukraine today, 37 people were killed, 3 of whom were children, and 170 were injured, including 13 children, as a result of Russia's brutal missile strike. No, it is already confirmed that this is a Ukrainian missile. The Russians never attack civilian installations, and this from the beginning of the SMO. And this is widely documented, and even documented by Ukrainian dissidents as well.
Do you have any intel on Russian plans to respond to the attack on the beach on Sevastopol 3 Sundays ago?
We don't, Judge. This is national security. This is state secret, and especially foreigners, we don't have access to that at all. There's a lot of speculation going on in Moscow, and there's going to be an asymmetrical response. This means long-term, not immediate, not in the next few days, maybe not even the next few weeks. But they are improving their intel on where these missiles are located. They already intercepted Storm Shadows and Scalps, and they are doing reverse engineering of Storm Shadows and Scalps. And they are getting much better in terms of their aerial intelligence network in locating where the missiles are. So it's the Russian way. It's always fascinating. There is never a tit for tat response. Only when that there's an enormous public clamor, we have to do this now. But usually it's asymmetrical, takes time, and they study the possibilities. And the fact that there are less American drones over the Black Sea in this past 2 to 3 weeks, it's already telling part of the story.
That means that the conversation that Foreign Minister Lavrov had with the American ambassador to Russia was passed on to the right people in Washington, and they acted upon it. Got it. Pepe, it's always a pleasure, my dear friend. I'll be off the next 2 weeks for my summer vacation, but we'll look forward to seeing you at the very end of July or the very early part of August. God love you, my dear man.
You're going to Italy.
Judge, when you take a look at the level of destruction that's been inflicted on Gaza, it's unimaginable. Now, normally, if you bomb a city, populations can flee the city. So the bombs start falling, the populations can, those who survive, which is the majority of people, can flee and move elsewhere. Not in Gaza. Their neighborhood gets bombed, they move to another neighborhood. That gets bombed, they move to another. And then what happens in Rafah, they're in open camps and the camps get bombed. The Israelis have literally been carrying out a policy of genocide. So this number is not implausible to me at all. And, the fact is the number could even be higher. We don't know what bodies are lying underneath the rubble. They haven't had a chance to come in and clear that out. When a building collapses, when it pancakes, you're not getting those bodies. And many times the horrific nature of the collapse, those bodies don't exist anymore. So no, this is a real number. I think the world's become immune to that's the problem when you start dealing with numbers that are this grotesque in terms of the scope. We've seen too many bombs drop to become too immune to it. Nothing shocks us anymore. How many times do you have to see the jaw ripped off of a young girl before it just becomes another jaw ripped off of a young girl, a young baby torn in half? How many times do you have to see that before the brain just starts to cycle through it? And unfortunately, that's where we are today. What Israel is doing to the people of Gaza should generate so much more disgust and concern and condemnation. But the world has just become exhausted by this. This is a great tragedy. But that number is a very realistic number.
And the orchestrator of all of this, 2 weeks from tomorrow, will be given a hero's welcome on the floor of the House of Representatives before a joint session of Congress. I don't know if he's going to go to the White House or not. I haven't heard anybody in the Congress since this 186,000 number came out saying, tell him to stay home. This is the head of a criminal gang that runs an apartheid government and is a mass murderer. And the Republicans in the House have announced that they're going to exceed the 55 standing ovations that he received the last time he spoke in the House of Representatives. So I think you are quite right that the American public has become immune to this. With respect to members of Congress, they are terrified of the donor class. None of them is dare going to say, hey, Bibi, stay home. Agreed?
100%. Look, Judge, I don't want to get you in trouble with the censors or anything, but this election has proven the level of control that the pro-Israeli lobby has over the American democracy. Every single candidate backed by AIPAC has won. AIPAC poured $24 million into one race to buy a congressional, and it was
a primary. It wasn't even a general election.
Well, that's where AIPAC actually. That's where they get the most leverage because not too many people can pour all their resources into a primary and survive a general election. So even if somebody survived the primary challenge, generally speaking, they've, let's say I was running, AIPAC challenged me, put up a primary. All my war chest, which I'm saving to take on my opponent in the other party, now gets burned up in this primary. I get exhausted. They tear me apart. They're doing the work. And so by the time I stumble through this, let's say I win and I move into the general election, I'm beaten, I'm battered, and I'm generally speaking going to lose. So it's the primaries where AIPAC has the greatest leverage over people. People don't want to be primaried, so they quickly fall in the line. And it's a chilling impact because people say, oh my goodness, I don't want that to happen to me. What do I need to do to make sure that doesn't happen to me? And what they do is they vote straight down the line when it comes to supporting Israel.
Wow. What do you think will be Netanyahu's goal when he comes in 2 weeks? Is it to terrify the Congress into declaring war on Iran?
Actually, I think Netanyahu just wants continued strong American support. He's going to be going through a very difficult time soon because his military is fed up with him. No amount of American congressional support is going to change the reality that, as the IDF has said, Hamas has won. We can't beat Hamas. It's an ideology that can't be defeated. And the IDF has warned Netanyahu that a war with Hezbollah could be devastating for Israel. And so Netanyahu is about his legacy. And so I think what he's trying to do is secure the support of the United States in a post-conflict world so that he can continue to be the prime minister even when a ceasefire occurs. He wants assurances of continued American support if there is a ceasefire, that America will be there to help police any violations, etc. And he's also trying to get a rebound. He wants to come to America and get this massive embrace by the U.S. Congress that he can take back to Israel and play domestically in a political fashion, because he's a very unpopular prime minister right now. There's hundreds of thousands of Israelis protesting in the streets demanding his resignation. And he desperately needs this American trip to be a shot in the arm to keep him politically viable.
The other breaking news is the Haaretz story. As I said earlier, you reported this months ago. Max and Aaron broke the stories shortly after they happened. What has been the reaction in Israel to this whitewash, as Aaron called it in his now famous debate on Piers Morgan, whitewashing mass murder?
It's the standard thing. Blame Hamas. This is Hamas' fault. Don't point fingers at us. What about the rapes? What about the murdering of the babies? What about the ongoing violence? You support terrorists. How dare you speak up? That's the Israeli response. We saw that on Piers Morgan's show, and that's been the response ever since. But people, what Haaretz's story shows is something I pointed out literally within days of October 7th. I said that this, I called what Hamas did the greatest military raid in modern history because it was a military raid. You don't have to support Hamas, but you have to understand what they did was a military operation. Everybody said, how can it be a military operation? So many civilians were killed. I said they were all killed by Israelis. The number of civilians killed by Hamas is a very small percentage there. Over 400, close to 500 military people were killed by Hamas in this fight. Of that 1,200, of the remaining people, more than 60% were killed by Israelis, slaughtering them, butchering them. Yes, Hamas killed some, and they killed some in cold blood. There's enough video evidence out there that, I'm not trying to whitewash what Hamas did. But, when you set up a roadblock, people die. That's the reality of this conflict. But Hamas, the vast majority of the people Hamas killed were military people in a stand-up fight where Hamas prevailed on the battlefield. The vast majority of the civilians killed were killed by Israel invoking the Hannibal Directive. That's the reality of October 7th. Israel's been trying to create a narrative that shows that Hamas was, criminals, they were murderers, they were rapists, they were that. That's not the truth. Hamas carried out a military raid, a very deadly raid that was very effective in getting Israel to do what Hamas wanted them to do, which was to come into Gaza and create the situation that we have now where Israel's facing imminent defeat. The Israelis haven't been honest with the Israeli people. And what Haaretz is doing now is exposing the lies told by the Netanyahu government, told by the Israeli Defense Force. And there will be an accounting at some point in time within Israel because this is, again, the largest killing of Israelis in a single day. It turns out that they were killed by their own soldiers.
On the Piers Morgan interview, there was a very articulate, I would call him ruggedly handsome, retired IDF lieutenant colonel, who's a former IDF spokesman, who used about 3 words to say it's probably accurate. All the rest of his time was, as you have just indicated, calling Aaron a self-loathing Jew, attacking Aaron as a supporter of Hamas, never addressing the lawfulness or the morality of slaughtering soldiers and civilians by shooting them in the back as they were attempting to escape this conflagration. Question: how do these IDF soldiers, most of whom are reservists, feel about shooting their own people in the back because they were ordered to do it?
I think one day when this war is over and the page can be turned or the curtain pulled aside, and we start talking about the cost of war. I've talked about it here in the United States. I've talked about the cost of invading Iraq, an illegal war of aggression. American soldiers went over there after 9/11. They enlisted in great numbers to serve their country patriotically. They ended up going to Iraq, invading and occupying the country. They did it aggressively because they were told it was the right thing to do. But after a while, today they all reflect and they know what they did was illegal. What they know, they participated in an illegal war of aggression. They know that they committed horrific murders, that it wasn't justified kicking down the doors and taking out a family because somebody screamed when they shouldn't have screamed or whatever. And we collectively as a nation are paying a price for that with our veterans who they have PTSD for cause, and they're committing suicide in increasing numbers. this is Israel's future. These reservists who have been pulled out of their lives and sent off to do things, to fight, obey orders. At the time when you obey the orders, look, bloodlust is up. I mean, anybody who's been there knows what I'm talking about. It's very hard to stay cool and compassionate when you're in a firefight. Your eyes are getting intense, and you're laying down the fire, and you're doing things instinctively. And when you're told take them out, that's what we need to do to prevent Hamas from taking them in and leveraging them. That this is, you open fire. But later on, when it turns out that everything you fought for was a lie, everything was fabrication, everything was to help Benjamin Netanyahu, not help Israel, that it all was for nothing. Israel's going to pay a horrible price. They're going to have an entire generation of young Israelis who served in the military, primarily reservists, who are going to be emotionally and psychologically broken by this conflict, because they're going to have to live with the repercussions of what they did.
You have just given an intellectually honest, thought-provoking analysis of what we believed happened and now had it confirmed by Haaretz. Listen to the analysis, if you can call it that, given by Matt Miller, the spokesperson for. It's almost hard to keep from laughing if it wasn't such a tragic situation, because he's a goofball on steroids. But listen to his analysis to the very prudent question, cut number 14.
I wanted to ask you first if you read or heard about the Haaretz report on Israel employing the Hannibal directive on October 7th.
So I did see that report that moved over the weekend, and that's the limit of my knowledge of seeing that report from Haaretz.
Does that make you change your position or your perspective on what really happened that day, that the Israelis may be responsible for killing a majority of the people that died on that day?
Boy, it certainly does not, Saeed. I don't think there's any question. I don't think there's any question that it was Hamas. Just let me finish. I don't think it's any question it's Hamas that is responsible for the overwhelming number of deaths on October 7th.
Ambassador Freeman said this morning when he saw this is one of the reasons why the Biden-Blinken Department of State is the least respected State Department in America's post-World War II era.
Look, it's morally unconscionable. The truth is the truth. The facts don't lie. And when the Israeli media has come out and has the facts and tells the truth, you just expose the intellectual and moral baselessness of your administration, because he is an administration spokesperson. He's speaking on behalf of the administration by continuing the line, the logic that is that it's Hamas's fault. Hamas killed the majority of people. We know that factually that's just wrong. It's been proven that it's wrong. For him to stick to that and be dismissive of that, it undermines everything he tries to do. Because again, it's the old thing that I use when I judge people. I play a lot of golf with people, and I can tell you I learn a lot about people playing golf, because golf's about a game of honor, integrity, and rules. And you learn within the first couple of holes, does somebody adhere to the rules? Do they mark their ball properly? Do they move the ball in the fairway? And you're like, nah, those are people who take shortcuts. Matt Miller has proven that he's a man who takes shortcuts intellectually. I would never trust him to represent my country ever again. He should be fired on the spot. He handled that poorly, because your job as the spokesperson is to deal with facts. He could have simply said, we've received this report, we're still evaluating report, and we're trying to wrap our heads around what this report means, and I'll get back to you when we're finished with that. That at least buys time without compromising you intellectually and morally.
Does Israel want a broader war? Does Netanyahu speak for the Israeli public when he says he wants a 7-front war? And can he possibly pull that off with an exhausted army of reservists never intended for even a 9-month war?
Look, Israel in 2022, 2023 ran exercises both years together with the United States. They were designed to stress test Israel. The premise of each exercise was, what would happen if everybody attacked us at once? Could the IDF protect Israel from such a multifaceted, broad spectrum war, inclusive of Iran, Hezbollah, etc. But what they didn't factor in, both scenarios said, well, Hamas, that'll just be sort of an intifada on steroids. We'll handle that with border security and police forces. They never once, in planning this war game, envisioned that Gaza would become a major front that took a majority of Israel's military resources and then exhausted it for 9 months before they went into a full-scale war, because fighting Hezbollah isn't going to be fighting Hezbollah. It's going to become a Hezbollah, Iran, militia, Yemen, Syria war. It's going to be the war game that Israel practiced for 2 years and lost, by the way. The Israeli Defense Force knows the outcome of this. They lost. They lost when they had everything ready, when they had their troops weren't exhausted, where their airplanes weren't flying nonstop with maintenance issues, where they had all the ammunition. They still lost. Today, their army has said, we can't go in to Lebanon right now because we don't have the spare parts. Our equipment has been run to a frazzle. We've never prepared for a 9-month war. And now you want to go into Hezbollah against an enemy that's been preparing for over 18 years now for this fight. They're ready for this. Hezbollah just put out a video, again, part 2 of their video, that showed they know everything about Israel. They have targeted everything, and they have the missiles ready to hit them now. The IDF is telling that, we can't do this because not only will we probably not win, it's very likely we will lose, and lose strategically. It will be a decisive defeat of Israel of an existential nature. And so far, Netanyahu is heeded that advice, and hopefully he will continue to heed that advice.
How deep and how serious is the cleavage between Netanyahu and the IDF?
It's fundamental. It's at the very top. We saw evidence of that when the IDF spokesperson speaking about Hamas said that Hamas can't be defeated because it's an ideology and you can't defeat an ideology. And Netanyahu came out and immediately attacked that, and the head of the IDF came out and said, no, we support what our spokesperson said. Right there, boom, it's fundamental. And right now they're telling Netanyahu, we can't go into Lebanon because we will lose. We can't win this one. Don't even try to do this. This is why you see movement on Gaza for the first time, because Israel, I think, understands and that there has to be a ceasefire. It's the only way out, because if they continue to push in Gaza, then the pressure will be put on Netanyahu to expand into Hezbollah, and Israel can't win that one.
Switching over to Ukraine, Scott, and I want to talk to you in a few minutes about your new book covering Ukraine. But before we get there, the other news since you and I spoke last is the insistence by American mainstream media that the Russians intentionally attacked a hospital for children in Kyiv, even though we know for certain from the examination of the rubble that that was not the case. The question is, mainstream media still in the back pocket of American and British intel, I guess.
Yeah, and this is a tough one because, but my wife often tells me when I get up in the morning, please don't go on X and don't start posting, because I read what comes in over the night, and sometimes I get very angry at what people say, and I fire off responses. And I responded very aggressively about this attack, and I took the position that it wasn't a Russian KH-101 cruise missile, that it was probably a NASAMS missile. But then as the data comes in, you begin to doubt yourself. You begin to look at everything. And I also understand that, I'm not in a position to forensically analyze this in the totality necessary to make a definitive conclusion. So maybe I shouldn't commit to hard positions on X the way I did. But then I saw the Russian ambassador, who I respect greatly, speak at the United Nations. And I know this man, and I know the Russian Foreign Ministry. And he was very strong in asserting that it was not a Russian cruise missile, that it was a NASAMS missile. And I don't see Russia getting out ahead of itself at that level unless it has run the data. And I'll tell you what, the Russians know exactly how many KH-101s they fired. And I have a feeling that when they counted the explosions in Kiev, there was one additional explosion. So they know that something hit what isn't supposed to hit. And when they look at the data of where the KH-101s hit at the industrial facility, they went, we hit every target we aimed at. There's an additional explosion. It's not ours. And that's why I think Russia's comfortable with this. There are people who say the size of the warhead couldn't do what it did. I'll tell you what, the size of a KH-101 warhead would have leveled that hospital. The warhead of an ASIMS isn't necessarily that much, but unexploded fuel could lead to an additional explosion. We don't know. If the Ukrainians have the data, and I will tell you right now, if I were in Ukraine, give me an hour and a half on that site, I would grid it out, and I would collect the data necessary to tell me exactly what struck it. If they're saying it was a KH-101, then they need to provide the forensic data. But I respect the Russian ambassador. I respect the fact that he's not going to position Russia at the Security Council to be exposed for a lie. When he says that it wasn't a Russian missile, that it was an ASIMS, and he specifically identified it being a system provided by Norway. So Russia, remember, they have this area blanketed with electronic warfare. They know when a NASAMS missile is fired. They know it's fired. They can track it. I don't think the Russians commit to a storyline like this by making things up. And so I'm comfortable saying that it wasn't a Russian KH-101, that it was a NASAMS missile. I'm willing to be proven wrong on this because I acknowledge I'm not there. I can't do the forensics myself. But, at least I'm honest enough to say, I'm committing to this, but, I'm going to hedge waiting thing. That's not the mainstream media. The mainstream media is out echoing, the U.S. position. And you have to ask yourself why. And, of course, the reason why is that we've convened today in Washington, D.C., a NATO summit where they're going to use this as a justification to justify continuing to pour billions of dollars into Ukraine, maybe expanding the scope and scale of the conflict by promoting more aggressive NATO posturing in Ukraine. If you say you're for the Ukrainian people, of course you have to be sympathetic to the civilians who lost their lives. Even if this was an accident,
Right.
Bottom line, you don't deserve that. So it's one thing about being sympathetic, but then you also have to understand, why is a missile hitting this site? Why is this war taking place? And when we back it up, it's because the United States provoked Ukraine into posturing itself aggressively against Russia, provoking the conflict that we have today. This conflict could have ended in April of 2022 had Ukraine accepted the terms that were negotiated by Russia and Ukraine in Istanbul. But Boris Johnson told them to say no. And now this war has been expanded to the point where Ukraine is incapable of telling the truth. And I'm afraid that what we're seeing right now is just another Ukrainian lie that's being echoed by Western mainstream media to prolong a conflict that has been devastating for the people of Ukraine.
Listen to the Polish foreign minister, who seems determined to provoke Russia into a battle with Poland. Number 15.
We have been talking about this idea for a long time, which, by the way, was born in Poland, about this idea of responding NATO to missile attacks in terms of missiles that are heading towards Poland and are still on Ukrainian territory, with the idea of try to shoot them down, not waiting until they fly into NATO territory, but still over Ukrainian soil.
Excuse me, the Polish prime minister, not foreign minister, even more serious. So what is he going to do? Aim Polish missiles at Russian missiles while they're over Ukraine territory and expect himself, his own people, not.
Revolutionary salute, family Curtis Mitchell, for the $5 super sticker to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life, and I absolutely appreciate the love, family. Salute.
To be attacked for that?
Yeah, I'll just tell you right now that Russia won't put up with this. I can't speak for Russia, but it's just clear that Russia won't put up with this. It's a bilateral security agreement. It's not a NATO agreement. If Poland seeks to implement a bilateral agreement that has it carrying out an act of war in Ukraine, Russia will take out the air defense systems that fire. That's a guaranteed. As soon as they fire, and Russia will take them out. I mean, I don't know what this idiot thinks he's doing. I'm hoping that at this summit, he will be given the dressing down that he deserves. For instance, if I'm the Americans, I would simply tell him, you do understand that if you fire that missile, we're out of Poland. We're done. We're not going to sit here and provide a shield to you while you try to put our soldiers at risk. We're there to protect you from Russian aggression, but you don't get to be aggressive against Russia and Ukraine, thinking that NATO is going to back you up. We're not going to be there. This is what I would tell him if I were the American. In fact, I'd start pulling troops out right now just to send a signal. You need to shut up, and you don't get to speak until you speak to us. We are the top dogs in NATO. Why we let Poland bark like this and put our troops at risk? We're already in a situation where both NATO, the United States, have lowered the threshold for the use of tactical nuclear weapons. Russia's saying it's going to lower it as well to match that. And here, this moron in Poland is talking about firing air defense missiles to shoot down Russian missiles. He knows for a fact that when Russia fires missiles, yes, they approach Poland, but then they maneuver so that their final trajectory is parallel to Poland when they hit the targets they need to hit. He knows that NATO has been stacking equipment in warehouses along the Polish border in the vicinity of Lvov and et cetera, that are legitimate military targets, and Russia's hitting them. So what he's saying is we need to protect the equipment we send to Poland, so we're going to extend an umbrella of air defense over that so Russia can't strike those legitimate targets. That's not how it works, Tusk. You want to play big boy games? Get ready when the big boys come in and knock your teeth out, because that's what's going to happen. And then we're talking about the potential of general war. I hope every American understands what I'm saying here. This isn't about posturing. This isn't about being a tough guy. This is about dying. All of us dying. This is going to impact us because Russia will hit these targets, and then Poland will turn to NATO and say, you must protect us. And there will be some in NATO that say, yes, that's what we need to do. And then they make the wrong step, and then we have the bigger bombs going off, and then we all die, because there's no such thing as a limited nuclear war. There's no such thing.
As we speak, Mr. Tusk and his fellow heads of state and heads of foreign ministries are meeting in Washington. Does any of them, besides Viktor Orban, this is NATO now, any of them besides Orban understand that Ukraine cannot win, that this is futile, that every dollar and every euro that they put into this is just killing innocents and will never be returned the way they expect it to return? In other words, will sane heads prevail, or is something worse going to come out of NATO's glorying in its 75th anniversary in Washington, D.C. this week?
Well, one of the problems is the 75th anniversary, and NATO needs to be seen as being the strongest it's ever been, more unified than ever. These are the talking points that they want to come out of this summit. Meanwhile, the United States has already said that they're going to tell Ukraine that they're not going to be NATO members because they're the most corrupt nation on the earth. They have to solve the corruption problem. Jens Stoltenberg has already admitted what he said: don't even think about membership for the next 10 years. Also, you have to win this war before you become a member of NATO. These are the realities, the harsh realities. And then the other realities are this is an unsustainable conflict. NATO has been briefed that Russia is getting stronger every day. And NATO is getting weaker every day. And that the costs, they're going to be talking about the costs of building up NATO. These are prohibitive costs. They don't have the economies that can sustain the outlays necessary to get the militaries where they need to be. And if they did start investing in them, we're talking 2029, 2030. Nothing that's going to impact, what's going on with Russia and Ukraine today. This is a lost war. And the only way this war doesn't get lost on the trajectory that it's heading is if NATO directly intervenes, but NATO's not positioned to directly intervene. Again, we come up with the Polish missiles. What happens if Poland fires these missiles? Russia counterattacks, then what? Poland doesn't have the military necessary to project power into Western Ukraine in a meaningful fashion. They would be annihilated. And if American troops and NATO troops came in, they've crossed a red line now that becomes an existential issue for Russia. Nuclear weapons will be employed. Russia just did a major test of its tactical nuclear weapons to send this signal to the United States. A lot of people aren't talking about, after the Crimea beach incident we spoke about earlier, the U.S. ambassador was summoned to the foreign ministry of Russia, where she was read the Riot Act. And she was told that Russia blames America and will hold America accountable, and that there will be retaliation. She called back, and that's why Lloyd Austin picked up the phone and called Belousov. And again, talking Belousov told him the same thing. Lavrov just said the same thing. I don't know what these people are thinking, but if they want to expand the conflict, they will get a response by Russia, and this response will lead us down the path of the inevitability of a nuclear exchange. That's how dangerous this is.
Have we stopped reconnaissance over the Black Sea since those telephone calls?
Well, the Global Hawks got diverted to other areas. There's ways to collect intelligence. The Global Hawk was, a system that was configured to collect against specific systems. So it's been withdrawn because the Russians said they're going to shoot it down. The British went in with an RC-135 with a fighter escort, but I think that was just a one-time show of force. But there's other things. I don't want to get into it too much, but there's other things that can be done to collect the same systems. But the bottom line is we were told by the Russians that if you want to play stupid games, then you win stupid prizes.
Before I ask you about your book, I think you'll appreciate this. Here is a very candid Viktor Orban on his flight from Moscow back to Hungary after he just spent 2 days with Vladimir Putin, assessing for a journalist Vladimir Putin, the man.
He is more than 100% a rational person. When he negotiates, when he starts to explain a point, when he makes a proposal, saying yes or no, he's super rational. How to say in Hungarian? Cool-blooded, Cool-blooded. Low profile, cool-blooded, very cautious, punctually formation, discipline. So it's a real challenge to have a negotiation and to be prepared if you would like to keep the intellectual and political level of him.
He wasn't talking about Joe Biden.
No, I mean, here's the problem. The second you start to speak positively about Vladimir Putin, people, oh, you're a Putin tool, you're a Putin puppet. I don't care, man. Orban's not a Putin tool and a Putin puppet. Why can't we just respect the guy for being the president of a nation or a leader of a nation for a quarter of a century? And the fact is, he's been around a long time. He knows these subjects intimately. He's been a very successful president, taking Russia from where it was in 1999 to where it is today. You don't have to agree with him. You don't even have to like him or support him, but you have to respect the professionalism of this guy. Listen to his speeches, listen to his preparations. To his discussion. He is extraordinarily well prepared. Words mean something to him. He doesn't use words loosely. And so I think what Viktor Orban did is paint a very accurate, profile of Vladimir Putin, and it's one that should, pour cold water over the heads of anybody who thinks that he's bluffing, that he's, this out of control, crazy, emotional dictator. No, he's actually a very cool-blooded, rational, pragmatic person. And here's the important part: who wants to do the right thing by Russia, which means he's not, running off to get involved in a nuclear confrontation or expand the war. That's not his goal. At the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, he spoke at the plenary session, and he did 2 major interviews with media, international media and Russian media. If you think that he's an irrational dictator who's trying to bully people, he would have led off all 3 of these by talking about the war in Ukraine and Russia's role in the war in Ukraine and emphasizing that. He led off on the economy. He talked about how Russia is moving forward economically. He talked about BRICS. He talked about, things that are happening of a social economic nature, not about the war. The war was secondary. And that's the reality. This is a man who's trying to do the right thing by his country. And it's amazing when leaders define the right thing as being peaceful coexistence with their neighbors.
Tell us about your book covering Ukraine, and who wrote the blurbs for that book?
Kofi, follow me.